My daughter-in-law leaned over the honey-glazed ham and whispered that the best Christmas present I could give them was for me to disappear without a trace. My son, holding a glass of wine I paid for, nodded in agreement. So I granted their wish. I did not scream. I did not fight. I simply walked out the door, activated a dormant legal clause, and sold the mansion they were sleeping in while they were still opening their gifts. What I left on their doorstep the next morning left them stunned and broke. My name is Marcus Holloway. People call me Mac, and at 71 years old, I just taught my ungrateful family a lesson worth $2 million. Before I tell you how I turned their world upside down, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been treated like a burden in a house you paid for. The nightmare began on Christmas Eve in Lake Forest, Illinois. The driveway was filled with Range Rovers and BMWs belonging to Tiffany's friends. My daughter-in-law Tiffany had insisted on hosting the holiday gala this year. She told everyone it was her house, her party, and her menu. But the credit card on file with the catering company was mine. The mortgage payments for this 4,000 square foot colonial estate were automatically deducted from my trust account every month. But to the 30 guests laughing in the living room, I was just the old black man sitting in the corner who took up too much space. I adjusted my tie, feeling the fabric of my suit tighten around my neck. It was a Brioni suit vintage from the days when I ran the biggest paving crew in Chicago. I built highways. I laid the foundations for half the skyscrapers in the loop. But here in this house, I was treated like a piece of furniture that had gone out of style. Tiffany walked past me, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors I had installed with my own hands 10 years ago. She didn't look at me. She was too busy directing the servers. She had invited her circle of friends, a group of young, wealthy socialites who looked at me with a mix of pity and annoyance. I heard one of them ask who I was earlier. Tiffany had replied, "Oh, that is just Darius's dad. We are trying to find a facility for him, but they are all so expensive." I gripped my cane tighter. I am perfectly healthy. I swim 3 times a week. My mind is sharper than a tack. But to Tiffany, being 71 meant I was mentally expiring. She wanted me gone because I didn't fit her image. She wanted a modern, youthful brand for her lifestyle blog, and a black father-in-law with calloused hands and stories about the civil rights movement ruined her aesthetic. Dinner was announced. I stood up to move toward the main dining table, the one made of solid mahogany that had belonged to my late wife, Ruby. But Tiffany intercepted me. She placed a hand on my chest, her fake nails digging into my lapel. "Dad," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "we made a special spot for you. The main table is a bit crowded with our investors and partners. You would be more comfortable over there." She pointed to a small folding card table set up near the kitchen door. It was the kids' table. My granddaughter Maya, the only person in this house who actually loved me, was sitting there. She was 8. I was 71. This was my seat. I swallowed my pride and sat down next to Maya. She smiled at me, her front tooth missing. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mommy said you spill things, so you have to sit here." I looked at the main table. My son Darius was laughing at a joke made by a man I didn't know. Darius was 38 years old. I had paid for his college, his MBA, and the down payment on his first car. I had handed him the keys to a life I never had. And now he wouldn't even make eye contact with me. He was drinking a bottle of Cabernet that cost $200. I knew the price because I bought the case last week. The dinner dragged on. I ate my turkey in silence while the adults at the big table discussed ski trips to Aspen and summer homes in the Hamptons. They talked about money as if it were an endless resource, never realizing the source of the river they were drinking from was sitting 10 feet away at a folding table. Then came the gift exchange. This was Tiffany's favorite part. She loved the performance of it. There were mountains of boxes under the 12-foot tree. Darius had bought her a diamond tennis bracelet. She screamed with delight, showing it off to her friends. Then she gave Darius a set of golf clubs, custom-made. I knew who paid for those too, since Darius had been unemployed for 3 months and was using the emergency credit card I gave him for groceries. Then it was my turn. I didn't have flash. I didn't have wrapping paper with gold leaf. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a simple white envelope. I called Maya over. "Come here, sweetheart," I said. The room went quiet. Tiffany sipped her champagne, watching with a smirk. She expected a toy, maybe a doll. Maya opened the envelope. Inside was a passbook for a savings bond and a deposit slip. "It is $500, I said, my voice steady. "I started a college fund for you. Every month I will add to it. By the time you are 18, you will have choices." I was proud of this gift. It was real. It was a seed for the future. Tiffany walked over and snatched the book from Maya's hands. She looked at the number and laughed, a dry, cruel sound that cut through the room. $500. She scoffed. She held it up for her friends to see. Oh, look, everyone. Grandpa Mac is feeling generous. 500 whole dollars. That won't even buy the strap for the Birkin bag I want. The guests chuckled nervously. Dad, Tiffany said, looking down at me. This is embarrassing. You have been living here rent-free for 5 years. We feed you. We house you. And this is how you contribute. $500. You are so cheap, it is actually painful. I felt the heat rise in my neck. Rent-free. I paid the property tax. I paid the utilities. The deed to the house was in a trust that I controlled, but I had never thrown that in their faces. I wanted them to feel independent. I wanted them to feel like owners. Clearly, that was a mistake. It is an investment, I said quietly. It grows over time. Like respect. Tiffany rolled her eyes. Darius, say something to your father. He is ruining the vibe. Darius looked at me. His eyes were glazed from the wine. Dad, come on, he mumbled. Tiff is right. You could have tried harder. It is Christmas. You are sitting on that pension money. My pension money. They thought I was living off a union pension. They had no idea I had sold my construction firm for 8 figures 5 years ago. I kept it a secret because I didn't want them to become lazy. Too late for that. Tiffany handed the bank book back to me like it was a used tissue. Keep it, she said. We don't need your pocket change. Honestly, Mac, you want to know what I really want? She leaned in close. The room was silent. The smell of her expensive perfume was suffocating. I want my house back, she hissed. You hover around here like a ghost. You judge everything we do. You are old, you are boring, and you are in the way. The best Christmas present you could give us would be if you just disappeared, vanished, without a trace. She stood up and spread her arms. Isn't that right, Darius? Wouldn't life be so much easier if Dad just went on a permanent vacation? My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at my son, my flesh and blood, the boy I held when his mother died, the boy I taught to ride a bike. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to be a man. Darius looked at his wife, then at his rich friends, and finally at me. He shrugged. You are kind of a downer lately, Dad, Darius said. Maybe you should go visit your sister in Georgia or something. Give us some space. We need room to breathe. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the guests looked uncomfortable now. Maya started to cry softly, sensing the malice in the air. I looked at Tiffany. She was smiling, a victorious, predatory smile. She thought she had won. She thought she had shamed me into submission. She thought I was a helpless old man with nowhere to go. I slowly stood up. My knees popped the only sound in the room. I reached out and took the envelope from the table. I placed it back in my inside pocket right next to my heart. I understand, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. I didn't recognize it myself. You want me to disappear. You want space. You want to be the sole owners of this life. Consider it done, I said. I turned around. I didn't look back at Darius. I didn't say goodbye to Maya because I knew I would see her again under different terms. I walked out of the living room, past the 12-foot tree, past the catering staff who were looking down at their shoes. I walked down the hallway to the guest suite they allowed me to occupy. I didn't pack my clothes. I didn't pack the toiletries. I took one small leather suitcase from the closet. Inside, I placed a framed photo of my wife Ruby, my military dog tags from Vietnam, and the black file folder I kept under my mattress. The folder contained the deed to the house. It contained the power of attorney documents. It contained the access codes to the trust fund that paid for every single luxury in this home. I walked out the side door into the cold Illinois winter. The snow was falling softly. The air was crisp and clean, washing away the stench of greed I had just left behind. I pulled out my phone. It was 11:30 at night on Christmas Eve. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Sterling, I said, when the voice answered. Merry Christmas, Mac, the voice on the other end said. It was Sterling Vance, my corporate attorney and old poker buddy. Why are you calling so late? I looked back at the house. The lights were blazing. I could see the silhouettes of people dancing in the window. They were celebrating my departure. They thought they were free. Execute Protocol 0, I said into the phone. There was a pause on the line. Sterling's voice lost all its warmth. Are you sure Mac Protocol Zero is scorched earth? It cuts everything. Power, water, credit cards, access. It initiates the immediate liquidation of the asset. There is no going back. I watched Darius walk past the window, refilling his glass. I am sure, I said. They wanted me to disappear. So I am going to disappear. And I am taking everything that belongs to me with me, done, Sterling said. By tomorrow morning, that house will not exist on their grid. I hung up. I threw the phone into a snowbank. It was on their family plan anyway. I walked down the long driveway toward the main road where an Uber was already waiting. I didn't look back. Inside the house, the music was loud, the wine was flowing. Tiffany was probably toasting to her freedom. She had no idea that in exactly 8 hours when the sun rose, she wouldn't just be waking up with a hangover. She would be waking up homeless. The war had started, and they didn't even know they were on the battlefield. I didn't need to be in the room to know exactly how the morning after Christmas played out in the house I had just abandoned. I knew the rhythm of that house better than the beat of my own heart because I had paid for every single pulse of electricity and heat that flowed through its walls. The sun rose over Lake Forest at 7:15 in the morning, casting a cold, gray light onto the aftermath of the party. The living room was a graveyard of empty wine bottles, torn wrapping paper, and half-eaten plates of expensive hors d'oeuvres. My son Darius and his wife Tiffany slept until 10. That was their routine. They were allergic to mornings just as they were allergic to hard work. When they finally woke up fighting the headaches from the overpriced Cabernet, the first thing they noticed was the silence. Usually by 10 in the morning, the smell of my coffee would be drifting through the vents. Usually I would be in the kitchen quietly cleaning up the mess they had made the night before. But today the kitchen was cold. The sink was still piled high with dirty dishes. The coffee pot was empty and dry. Tiffany came down the stairs first, wrapping her silk robe tight around her. She walked into the kitchen expecting breakfast. When she saw the mess, she sighed loudly, waiting for me to apologize. "Mac," she called out. "Dad, are you seriously still sleeping? We have guests coming for brunch at noon. This kitchen is a disaster." There was no answer. She checked the guest suite. She pushed the door open, ready to scold me for being lazy. But the room was pristine. The bed was made with military precision, the sheets pulled tight enough to bounce a quarter off of them. The closet door was open, revealing empty hangers. My shoes were gone. The picture of Ruby was gone. The smell of my Old Spice aftershave was already fading, replaced by the sterile scent of cleaning products. A slow smile spread across Tiffany's face. She didn't feel guilt. She didn't feel worry. She felt victory. She ran back upstairs to wake Darius. "Babe, wake up," she squealed, shaking his shoulder. "He actually did it. The old man is gone. He really left." Darius groaned, pulling the pillow over his head. "What are you talking about?" "He cleared out," Tiffany said, dancing around the bedroom. "His room is empty. He took his ugly suitcases and left. We finally have the house to ourselves. No more judgment. No more watching TV with the volume down. It is just us." Darius sat up, rubbing his eyes. He probably felt a twinge of unease, a small voice in his head reminding him that he hadn't paid for a single thing in this house in 5 years. But he pushed it down. He wanted to believe the fantasy, too. "Well," Darius mumbled, "I guess he went to his sister's place in Georgia like I suggested. He will be back in a week when he runs out of cash. Let's just enjoy the peace while it lasts." But Tiffany wasn't thinking about peace. She was thinking about renovation. She had hated my presence in that guest suite. She said my energy blocked her chakras. "I am going to turn his room into a yoga studio," she announced, grabbing her phone. "We can rip out that dusty carpet and put in bamboo flooring. I want a wall of mirrors and a sound system. I need to order those mats I saw on Instagram." She sat on the edge of the bed, tapping away on her iPhone. She went to her favorite luxury fitness site. She filled her cart with $3,000 worth of equipment, a new treadmill, premium yoga mats, a set of crystal singing bowls. She went to checkout. She selected the payment method saved on her browser. It was the American Express Platinum card, my card, the one I had given her for household emergencies only, which she interpreted as meaning anything she wanted. She hit purchase. The little wheel spun for a second. Transaction declined. She frowned. "That is weird," she muttered. She tried again. Transaction declined. "Please contact your financial institution." "Darius," she said, her voice rising an octave. "There is something wrong with the internet. The Amex isn't going through." Darius was in the bathroom splashing water on his face. "Just use the Visa," he called out. She switched to the Visa Infinite. "Also my card." Transaction declined. Card reported lost or stolen. Tiffany stood up, her face flushing red. "This is ridiculous. Why would he cancel the cards? He is just visiting his sister. You don't cancel cards when you go on vacation." "Darius, fix this. Call the bank." Darius walked out of the bathroom looking annoyed. He picked up his own phone. He had his own debit card, but the balance on it was usually hovering around zero. He relied on the monthly transfer I made to his account on the 26th of every month. Today was the 25th. "Relax," Darius said. "He probably just forgot to pay the bill or something. You know how he gets. He is old. He forgets things." Just then, Darius's phone pinged with a text message. He looked at the screen. It wasn't a Merry Christmas text from a friend. It was an automated alert from ComEd, the electric company. Urgent notice, the text read, "Service for 1402 Maple Drive is scheduled for disconnection within 24 hours. Outstanding balance, $1,240. Darius froze. He stared at the number. $1,200. How could an electric bill be that high? He had never seen an electric bill in his life. He didn't know that heating a 4,000-square-foot drafty colonial house in a Chicago winter cost a fortune. I had always just paid it. "What is it?" Tiffany asked, seeing the color drain from his face. "It is the power company," Darius stammered. "They say they are going to cut the lights. They say we owe $1,200. "That is impossible," Tiffany snapped. "Your dad pays the utilities. It is on auto pay. He has that set up with the trust fund." Darius tried to unlock his banking app to check the joint account status. He tapped in his passcode. "Access denied. User privileges revoked by administrator." His hands started to shake. The hangover was suddenly gone, replaced by a cold knot of fear in his stomach. He looked at Tiffany. "I can't get into the bank account," he whispered. Tiffany grabbed the phone from him. "Let me see that." She tapped furiously. Nothing happened. "Call him!" she screamed. "Call your father right now. Tell him to stop playing games. This isn't funny. I have friends coming over in 2 hours. I can't have the power go out." Darius dialed my number. I was sitting in a first-class seat on a flight bound for Miami, sipping a ginger ale. I watched my phone light up. Darius calling. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I sent it to voicemail. He called again. And again. Finally, he slammed the phone down on the duvet. "He is not answering," Darius said, his voice trembling. Tiffany paced around the room. She looked at the expensive curtains, the high ceilings, the life she thought she owned. For the first time, she realized that the foundation of her world was not made of concrete. It was made of my signature on a check. And I had just put the pen down. "What do we do?" Darius asked, looking like a lost child. Tiffany turned to him, her eyes narrowing. "We go to the bank," she hissed. "We go to the bank and we demand access. We are his family. He can't just cut us off. It is illegal. It is abuse." She was wrong, of course. It wasn't abuse. It was a lesson, and class had just begun. Suddenly, the smart home system beeped. The thermostat on the wall, which was usually set to a cozy 72 degrees, flashed a blue light. "Remote override activated," the robotic voice announced. "Temperature set to 50 degrees. Eco mode engaged." The vents clicked shut. The hum of the furnace died down. "What was that?" Tiffany shrieked. "Why is it getting colder?" Darius looked at the thermostat. "Dad is controlling it," he said, realization washing over him. "He has the master admin code. He is locking us out of the system." Tiffany grabbed a throw pillow and threw it at the wall. "This is insane. He is trying to freeze us out. Who does he think he is?" "He thinks he is the landlord," Darius said quietly. "Because he is." Darius walked over to the window and looked out at the driveway. His car, the Range Rover, was parked there. Or at least he thought it was. But as he looked closer, he saw a tow truck backing up the long driveway. A man in a yellow vest was hooking chains onto the front bumper of the SUV. Darius shouted, running to the window, "They are taking the car!" Tiffany ran to look. "That is my car! Stop them!" They ran downstairs barefoot, bursting out the front door into the snow. The cold air hit them like a physical blow. The tow truck driver was already hoisting the Range Rover up. "Hey," Darius yelled, waving his arms. "What are you doing? Put that down." The driver, a big man with a thick beard, didn't even look up. He just checked his clipboard. Repossession order, the driver grunted. Lease payments are 3 months behind. The primary leaseholder, Mr. Marcus Holloway, called this morning and voluntarily surrendered the vehicle. Said he didn't want to pay for it anymore. "No!" Tiffany screamed, grabbing the driver's arm. "You can't take it! My yoga mats are in there!" The driver shook her off gently but firmly. "Ma'am, step back. Unless you have $6,000 in cash to cover the arrears and the penalty fees, this car is going to the impound lot." Darius patted his pockets. He didn't have $6, let alone $6,000. He watched helplessly as the car, the symbol of his status, was dragged down the driveway, leaving tracks in the fresh snow. They stood there in the freezing cold, shivering in their pajamas. The house behind them was already starting to cool down. The power company was coming next. Darius looked at Tiffany. Her mascara was running. Her lips were blue. "He really meant it," Darius whispered. "He really disappeared. And for the first time in his life, my son realized that without me, he wasn't a successful businessman living in a mansion. He was just a guy standing in the snow without a ride. The house didn't just go dark. It went dead. It happened at exactly 10:15 in the morning, just as Tiffany was trying to upload a story to Instagram complaining about the tow truck. 1 second, the router lights were blinking a steady, reassuring green. The next second, they were black. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The ambient noise of the modern world, the heating vents, the air purifiers, the smart speakers vanished, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing against their eardrums. Tiffany screamed. Not a scream of terror, but a scream of inconvenience. She tapped her phone screen furiously. "Darius, the Wi-Fi is down. Fix it. I am trying to post." Darius was standing by the window staring at the empty spot where his Range Rover used to be. He turned to look at the thermostat on the wall. The display, usually a glowing blue circle, was dead. He walked over and tapped it. Nothing. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. No signal bars for the Wi-Fi. Just the weak LTE signal from the cell tower miles away. He tried to turn on the light switch in the hallway. Click. Nothing. Click. Nothing. "It is a power outage," Darius said, his voice sounding small in the sudden quiet. "The whole grid must be down. Probably a storm coming or something." But outside, the sky was a piercing, cloudless blue, and across the street, the neighbors' Christmas lights were still twinkling merrily on their porch. The street lamps down the block were off, but the houses on either side of them clearly had power. Smoke was rising from the chimney next door. "It is just us," Tiffany whispered, looking out the window. "Why is it just us?" Then the cold began to creep in. I had installed a high-efficiency smart home system 3 years ago. It was controlled entirely by a central hub linked to my personal server. When I executed Protocol 0, I didn't just stop paying the bill. I remotely engaged the vacation lockout mode. This feature was designed to shut down all non-essential systems to save energy when the house was empty. The problem for them was that the house wasn't empty. The radiant floor heating, which kept Tiffany's bare feet warm on the imported Italian tile, shut off. The forced air furnace went silent. In Chicago in late December, a house without heat loses its warmth in a matter of hours. The temperature inside began to drop degree by agonizing degree. "Darius, do something," Tiffany yelled, hugging her arms around herself. "It is freezing in here." "Call the electric company again," Darius tried, but his battery was at 12%. He had forgotten to charge it the night before because he was too drunk. He dialed the number for ComEd again. This time he got a live agent after a 20-minute hold that drained another 4% of his battery. "Ma'am," he pleaded into the phone, "we need the power back on. I can pay the bill. Just tell me how much." The agent on the other line was polite but firm. "I am sorry, sir. The account holder, Mr. Marcus Holloway, has submitted a formal request for service termination. This isn't a suspension for non-payment anymore. The contract has been canceled. We cannot restore power without a new inspection and a new deposit, which takes 3 to 5 business days." 3 to 5 days, Darius shouted. "We will freeze to death." "You can open a new account in your name, sir," the agent suggested. "But since you have no credit history at this address, the security deposit will be $3,000. Darius hung up. He didn't have $3,000. He didn't even have 300. "Call your father," Tiffany hissed. Her teeth were actually chattering now. She had put on a sweater, but the damp cold of the stone house was seeping into her bones. "Call him right now and tell him I'm going to sue him for endangerment." Darius dialed my number again. He had my contact saved as Dad, wallet in his phone. I had seen it once by accident. It hurt then. Now it just made me smile as I sat on my balcony in Florida feeling the warm ocean breeze. He pressed the call button. He put it on speaker so Tiffany could hear him yell at me. The phone rang once. Then came the 3 ascending tones that everyone dreads. "Do-do-do. We are sorry," the automated voice said, cheerful and robotic. "The number you have reached is no longer in service. Please check the number and try your call again." Darius stared at the phone. He dialed again. Same result. He changed his number. Darius said, his face pale. He actually changed his number. He has had that number for 20 years. He is ghosting us, Tiffany said, her voice rising in panic. He is ghosting his own son. Who does that? What kind of monster does that? The kind of monster who is tired of being treated like an ATM machine, I thought to myself as I imagined the scene. Darius sat down heavily on the couch. The leather was cold against his skin. He needed money. Money solved everything. If he had money, he could go to a hotel. He could buy a generator. He could leave. He opened his banking app. He relied on LTE data, now watching the little spinning wheel on the screen. He prayed. He actually prayed to God, asking for a miracle. He knew the joint account usually had a buffer. I always kept about $10,000 in there for household expenses. The app loaded. The dashboard appeared. Joint checking. Holloway family. Darius blinked. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. He thought maybe he was missing a 0. Or 3 zeros. Available balance $42.14. Darius dropped the phone on the cushion. What Tiffany asked. "How much is there? Can we get a hotel room at the Ritz?" $42? Darius whispered. "What do you mean? 4,200? "That won't last long, but it is enough for a week," Tiffany said. "No, Tiff. Not 4,200. 42. 4-2. That is it." Tiffany snatched the phone. She scrolled through the transaction history. There it was. A transfer made at 11:59 p.m. the previous night. Transfer to external account ending in 88999. $9,800. "He took it," Tiffany screamed. She threw the phone onto the rug. "He stole our money." "It was never our money," Darius said, his voice hollow. "It was his money. His name was primary on the account. He just withdrew it." $42, Tiffany repeated, staring at the wall. That is 2 bottles of wine. That is a salad at lunch. We have $42 to our names." The realization hit them harder than the cold. They were destitute. They had no cash. Their credit cards were dead. Their car was gone. And they had $42 to survive a Chicago winter. Just when they thought it couldn't get worse, the doorbell rang. Hope flared in Darius's eyes. "It's him," he said, jumping up. "He came back. I knew it. He is trying to scare us, but he came back. He wouldn't leave us like this." He ran to the door. He didn't even check the peephole. He threw it open, ready to apologize, ready to beg, ready to say whatever I wanted to hear. But I wasn't there. Standing on the porch were 2 large men in blue uniforms. Behind them, a large box truck was idling in the driveway, puffing gray exhaust into the cold air. The side of the truck read, "Lux Living Rentals. Premium Furniture Leasing." "Mr. Holloway?" the lead man asked, holding a digital tablet. "Yes," Darius said, confused. "Is my dad in the truck?" The man shook his head. "No, sir. We are here for the pickup. Order number 7742. Cancellation of service." "Pickup?" Darius asked. "Yeah," the man said, stepping past Darius into the foyer. He wiped his muddy boots on the rug. "Mr. Marcus Holloway canceled the lease on the living room suite and the master bedroom entertainment package this morning. He paid the early termination fee. Said we should come get it immediately." "Wait!" Tiffany screamed, running from the living room. "You can't come in here. That is my sofa. That is my television." The man looked at his tablet. "Actually, ma'am, according to the serial numbers, this is property of Lux Living, and since the contract is voided, we have to repossess it." He whistled to his partner. "Okay, grab the sectional first. It comes apart in 3 pieces. Then get the 85-inch Sony from the wall." Darius and Tiffany stood frozen in the center of the living room, shivering in their pajamas, watching as their life was dismantled piece by piece. "Please," Darius begged, grabbing the man's sleeve. "Please don't take the TV. It is the only thing we have to pass the time. The internet is down." The man shrugged, pulling his arm away. "Sorry, buddy. Job is a job." They watched as the men lifted the massive leather sectional sofa, the one Tiffany told her friends cost $10,000 custom from Italy. In reality, I was leasing it for $200 a month because I knew Tiffany's taste changed every season. The room looked massive and empty without the furniture. Just a cold, hard wood floor and the fireplace that they couldn't turn on because the gas starter was electric. The men worked fast. Within 20 minutes, the living room was bare. The wall where the giant TV hung was now just a white expanse with 4 ugly screw holes. "Have a nice day," the man said, tipping his cap as he walked out the door. He closed the door, sealing them back inside the refrigerator that used to be a home. Darius looked at Tiffany. She was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, rocking back and forth. The floor was freezing. "I am hungry," she whispered. Darius walked to the kitchen. He opened the pantry. It was stocked with gourmet truffle oil, saffron threads, and expensive balsamic vinegar. There was no bread, there was no peanut butter, there was no ramen. He opened the freezer. It was full of organic frozen kale and acai bowls. But without electricity, the microwave didn't work. The oven didn't work. They couldn't cook anything. He looked at the digital clock on the oven. It was blank. Time had stopped. He checked his pocket. $42. "We can walk to the gas station," Darius said. "It is 2 miles away. We can buy sandwiches." "Walk?" Tiffany looked up, her mascara smeared down her cheeks. "In the snow. People will see us. My friends live in this neighborhood." "Would you rather starve?" Darius snapped. The hunger was making him brave. He went to the closet to get his coat. The Canada Goose parka I bought him last year. He put it on, grateful for the warmth. He opened the door again. The truck was gone. The silence was back. "Welcome to the real world, son," I whispered from 1,000 miles away. "I hope you brought good boots." The living room floor was hard and unforgiving. Without the plush Persian rugs that the rental company had rolled up and carried away, the cold from the basement seeped right through the wood planks. Darius and Tiffany sat on the floor, their backs against the wall where the 85-inch television used to hang. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and terrifying. My son looked at his wife. For the first time, he noticed the fine lines of panic etching themselves around her eyes. Tiffany wasn't used to losing. She was a woman who curated her life for social media, where everything was filtered bright and under her control. But there was no filter for freezing to death in a mansion you couldn't afford to heat. "Call the police," Tiffany said, breaking the silence. Her voice was brittle like dry leaves. Darius looked at her confused. "The police? For what, Tiff? We don't have an intruder. We have a dad who moved out." "He didn't just move out," she snapped. She stood up, wrapping her cashmere blanket tighter around her shoulders. "He is 71 years old. He is obviously having a mental breakdown. He cleared the bank accounts. He shut off the power. He disappeared." "That is not normal behavior, Darius. That is a medical emergency." She began to pace the empty room, her mind working frantically to spin the narrative. "If we report him missing," she reasoned, "the police will find him. They will bring him back. We can have him declared incompetent. We can get medical power of attorney. We can get control of the trust again." Darius hesitated. He knew I wasn't crazy. He knew exactly why I had left. But he was also cold, hungry, and broke. And when you are desperate, you will believe any lie that offers a way out. "Do it," Tiffany commanded. "Tell them your father is suffering from dementia and has wandered off with access to dangerous amounts of money. Tell them he is a danger to himself." Darius dialed 911. His hands were shaking. He told the dispatcher exactly what Tiffany told him to say. He lied to the authorities to save his own skin. 20 minutes later, a squad car rolled up the driveway. But it wasn't just any patrol car. It was the shift commander's vehicle. 2 officers stepped out. One of them was Sergeant Miller. I watched this unfold from my security cameras, which were still active and streaming directly to my iPad in Florida. I knew Sergeant Miller. I had fixed his father's transmission for free back in '98. I had donated to the Police Benevolent Fund every Christmas for 20 years. Darius opened the door, trying to look like a concerned son. "Officer, thank God you are here. My father, Marcus Holloway. He is gone. We think he is confused. He shut off the utilities and just vanished." Tiffany stepped forward, wiping away a fake tear. "We are so worried," she sniffled. "He's been acting so strange lately, forgetting things, getting aggressive. We just want him home safe." Sergeant Miller looked at them. He didn't take out his notepad. He didn't radio for a search party. He just stood there, hands on his belt, looking at the two young people shivering in their expensive pajamas. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway Miller said, his voice flat. "We are not going to file a missing persons report." What? Tiffany dropped the act instantly. Her eyes went wide. "Why not?" "An elderly man is missing, because he isn't missing," Miller said. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Darius. "Mr. Holloway emailed the chief of police this morning," Miller explained. "He informed us that he is traveling for an extended period to attend to personal business. He provided his contact information, his location, and proof that he is of sound mind and body. He also explicitly stated that he did not wish to be contacted by family members at this residence." Darius unfolded the paper. It was a printout of an email from my secure server. Attached to it was a photo of me sitting on a balcony with a cigar in one hand and today's newspaper in the other, smiling. "But," Darius stammered, "he cut off our power. He took our money. That is abuse." "Technically," Miller said, looking around the empty hallway. "The utilities are in his name. The bank accounts are in his name. A man is allowed to close his own accounts, son. It is a civil matter, not a police matter." Tiffany stepped in front of Darius, her face twisting with rage. "This is ridiculous. He is abandoning us. We have no heat. We have no food. You have to arrest him for neglect." Miller laughed, a short, dry chuckle. "Ma'am, you are both able-bodied adults in your 30s. Mr. Holloway is not your legal guardian. If you are cold, I suggest you get a job and pay the bill." He tipped his cap. "Have a nice day, folks." The police car drove away, leaving them standing in the open doorway, letting the freezing wind blow into the foyer. Tiffany screamed, a long, guttural scream of frustration. She slammed the door so hard the frame shook. "We need money," she said, her breathing heavy. "We need money right now." "We don't have any," Darius said, sinking back to the floor. "We have this house," Tiffany said. She looked up at the crystal chandelier that I had bought in Austria. "This house is worth $2 million. It is sitting right here. We can't sell it," Darius said. "Dad has the deed." "We don't need to sell it," Tiffany said, her eyes lighting up with a dangerous idea. "We refinance it. We get a home equity line of credit, AHELOC. We can pull out $200,000 or $300,000 in cash against the value of the home. Banks do it all the time." "But," Darius started. "We are his next of kin," Tiffany interrupted. "We have been living here for 5 years. Our mail comes here. We can tell the bank we are authorized. We just need a bridge loan until we get the legal stuff sorted with your dad." It was fraud, plain and simple, but to them it felt like survival. They went upstairs and dressed in their best clothes. Darius put on his Armani suit. Tiffany wore her Chanel blazer and the diamond earrings I had given her for her 30th birthday. They had to look the part. They had to look like the owners of a Lake Forest estate. They called an Uber. It cost $18 to get to the bank. That left them with $24 in their account. This was an all-or-nothing gamble. They walked into the First National Bank of Lake Forest with their heads held high. They demanded to see a loan officer immediately. Because of their address and their appearance, they were ushered into the office of Mr. Henderson, the branch manager. Mr. Henderson was a man who loved numbers more than people. He sat behind his mahogany desk, typing on his computer as Tiffany turned on the charm. "Mr. Henderson," Tiffany said, flashing her brightest smile, "we are in a bit of a pinch. We are doing some major renovations on our home at 1402 Maple Drive. You know the one, the big colonial on the corner?" Henderson nodded. "Lovely property." "Yes, well," Tiffany continued, "we need to access some of our equity. We are looking for a line of credit. Maybe $300,000 just for cash flow. We want to put in a pool house." Henderson typed in the address. He asked for Darius's social security number. Darius gave it, his heart pounding in his chest. He was sweating in his expensive suit. "Let's see here," Henderson mumbled, staring at the screen. 1402 Maple Drive. Valuation is $2.1 million. No outstanding mortgage. The property is free and clear. That is excellent. Tiffany squeezed Darius's knee under the desk. She could already feel the money. She was already mentally spending it on a hotel suite and a spa day. "Okay," Henderson said. "I can certainly process an application. I just need to verify the ownership details for the title search." He clicked a few more keys. Then he stopped. He squinted at the screen. He clicked again. His brow furrowed. "Is there a problem?" Darius asked, his voice cracking. Henderson looked up over his glasses. He looked at Darius. Then he looked at Tiffany. The warmth was gone from his face. Mr. Holloway, Henderson said slowly, "You listed yourself as the owner of this property on the intake form." "Yes," Darius said. "I mean, it is my family home. My father and I, we share everything." Henderson turned the monitor around so they could see it. "I am afraid that is not what the records say," the banker said. On the screen, in bold black letters, was the property title information. Owner of record, the Ruby Holloway Irrevocable Trust. Trustee, Marcus J. Holloway. Beneficiaries restricted. "You are not on the title, son," Henderson said. "In fact, your name appears nowhere on this document." Tiffany tried to salvage it. "Well, yes, it is in a trust. But we are the beneficiaries. We are the heirs." Henderson clicked another tab. "Actually, ma'am, I have the trust documents right here. Mr. Holloway updated them yesterday." He pointed to a line at the bottom of the screen. "Beneficiary status for Darius Holloway revoked pending review. Current occupancy status at will tenancy. No lease on file." Henderson sat back in his chair and folded his hands. "Do you know what this means?" he asked. Darius shook his head, too terrified to speak. "It means you don't own that house," Henderson said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't own the equity. You don't own the bricks. You don't even own the right to be there." He stood up. "As far as this bank is concerned, you aren't homeowners looking for a loan. You are guests who have overstayed your welcome. Actually, legally speaking, without a lease agreement, you are tenants. Or perhaps more accurately, squatters." Tiffany's mouth fell open. "Squatters. I am Tiffany Holloway. I am a socialite." "You are a liability," Henderson said, gesturing to the door. "I cannot give you a loan against a house you do not own. And since your checking account balance is currently $24, I suggest you leave before I have to call security." They walked out of the bank into the bright, cold afternoon sun. The Uber app showed that a ride home would cost $22. That would leave them with $2. They stood on the sidewalk, the wind whipping through their expensive clothes. They were two millionaires on paper who couldn't even afford a sandwich. And for the first time, the reality of what I had done truly hit them. I hadn't just cut them off. I had erased them. The knock on the door came at 3 in the afternoon. It was a sharp, authoritative rap that echoed through the empty hallway of the freezing house. Darius and Tiffany were huddled together on the floor under a pile of coats, trying to share body warmth. When they heard the knock, they both scrambled up. For a brief second, hope flickered in Darius's eyes. He thought it was me. He thought I had come back with groceries and an apology. He thought the nightmare was over. But when he opened the door, he didn't find his father. He found a courier from a legal process service. The man was dressed in a thick windbreaker, holding a flat, rigid cardboard envelope with a red stripe across the top. He didn't smile. He didn't offer greetings. "Darius Holloway?" the courier asked. "Yes," Darius said, his teeth chattering from the cold air rushing in. "Sign here," the man said, shoving a digital pad into Darius's shaking hands. Darius scribbled his name. The courier handed him the envelope and walked away without another word. Darius closed the door and leaned against it. The envelope was heavy. It felt like it contained lead plates. The return address wasn't my personal address. It was the address of Sterling Vance and Associates, the most expensive litigation firm in Chicago. "What is it?" Tiffany asked, her voice trembling. "Is it a check? Did he send us money?" Darius tore open the tab. He pulled out a stack of documents stapled together with a blue legal backing. He read the cover page. His face went gray, the kind of gray that usually only happens to people in hospital beds. "It is not a check," Darius whispered. "It is an invoice." Tiffany snatched the papers from him. She moved to the window to get enough light to read. As her eyes scanned the first page, her breathing became shallow and rapid. "Notice of delinquent rent and demand for immediate payment," she read aloud. She looked at the breakdown. It was a spreadsheet. A meticulous, terrifyingly accurate spreadsheet. Item 1, monthly rental of residential property located at 1402 Maple Drive. Rate $3,500 per month. Duration, 60 months. Total due, $210,000. Below that, there was more. Item 2, unpaid utilities and maintenance fees, 2019 to 2024. Total due, $48,000. Grand total due, immediately, $258,000. Tiffany screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear anymore. It was the scream of a trapped animal realizing the cage was smaller than it thought. She threw the papers onto the floor. "This is a joke," she yelled, kicking the wall. "He can't charge us rent. We are family. You don't charge your son rent." Darius picked up the papers. He turned to the second page. There was a copy of a document he had signed 5 years ago, right before they moved in. He remembered that day. I had told him it was just standard paperwork for the insurance company. He hadn't read it. He had just signed it because he wanted the keys to the mansion. It says here, Darius read, his voice breaking, that we agreed to a month-to-month tenancy at a fair market value of $3,500. It says that the landlord, that is Dad, graciously deferred payment until a later date at his discretion. He looked up at Tiffany. "He deferred it, Tiff. He didn't waive it, he just let the tab run." Tiffany grabbed her hair, pulling at the roots. "He planned this," she hissed. "He planned this from the very beginning. Who does that? Who keeps a tab on their own children for 5 years? I watched them from my balcony in Florida sipping an iced tea. I wasn't cruel. I was a businessman. In the construction world, you learn to document everything. If you don't have it in writing, it didn't happen. I knew the day would come when they would try to claim squatters' rights or adverse possession. I knew Tiffany would eventually try to take the house. So I prepared. Every month for 5 years, my accountant generated a rental invoice and marked it payment deferred. It was legal. It was binding. And now it was due." Tiffany fell to her knees amidst the legal papers. She started to sob, but it was an angry sobbing. She wasn't crying because she missed me. She was crying because her narrative was crumbling. She had spent 5 years telling her friends she was the lady of the manor. Now the paper trail proved she was just a tenant who hadn't paid her bills. "He tricked us," she screamed, pounding her fists on the hardwood floor. "He made us think this was ours." "No," Darius said softly, staring at the invoice. "He never said it was ours. We just assumed. We assumed he would give it to us because that is what he always did." Darius looked at the bottom of the page. There was a final clause. "Failure to remit full payment within 30 days will result in immediate legal action, wage garnishment, and asset seizure." Darius laughed. A dry, hysterical sound. Wage garnishment. They didn't have wages. Asset seizure. Their only asset was a closet full of designer clothes and a leased BMW that was probably getting towed tomorrow. "I need to get out of here," Darius said suddenly. The walls were closing in on him. The cold was seeping into his brain. He couldn't listen to Tiffany scream anymore. He couldn't look at the empty spot where the TV used to be. "Where are you going?" Tiffany yelled. "You can't leave me here." "I need to think," Darius shouted back. "I am going to the club. I need a drink. I need to be somewhere warm." He grabbed his car keys before remembering the Range Rover was gone. He cursed. He grabbed his coat and ran out the back door. The country club was only a mile away. He could run there. It was his sanctuary. It was the place where he was Mr. Holloway, the successful heir. He needed to feel important again. He ran through the snow, his expensive Italian loafers slipping on the ice. He didn't care. He ran until his lungs burned. He ran until he saw the limestone pillars of the Lake Forest Country Club. He slowed down to a walk as he approached the gatehouse. He straightened his coat. He wiped the sweat from his forehead. He tried to compose himself. He was a member here. My membership covered the whole family. It was a $20,000 a year fee paid by me, of course. He walked up to the pedestrian gate. He waved at the guard, a man named Patrick, who had known him for years. "Hey, Patrick," Darius said, trying to sound casual. "Just going to hit the sauna. Rough day." Patrick didn't wave back. He didn't buzz the gate open. He stepped out of the booth, his face grim. "Mr. Holloway," Patrick said, "I can't let you in." Darius forced a laugh. "What do you mean I forgot my fob? But you know me. Just buzz me in." Patrick shook his head. "I can't do that, sir. Your membership has been flagged." "Flagged?" Darius asked. "What are you talking about?" Patrick looked down at his clipboard. He seemed embarrassed. "Look, Mr. Holloway, I was told to inform you that the primary member, your father, removed you from the account effective this morning. He also placed a permanent ban on your guest privileges." Darius gripped the iron bars of the gate. "That is a mistake," he said, panic rising in his chest again. "My dad wouldn't do that. We play golf here every Sunday." The guard looked him in the eye. "It is not a mistake, sir. The note says—" He paused, reading the text. "The note says, Darius Holloway is no longer authorized to use club facilities funded by my labor. If he wishes to enter, he must submit his own application and pay the initiation fee." Darius stared at the warm, glowing windows of the clubhouse in the distance. He could see people inside, eating, drinking, laughing. It was a world he had lived in his whole life, and now he was on the outside gripping the cold iron bars like a prisoner. "Patrick." "Please," Darius begged. "It is freezing out here. Just let me in to use the phone, just for 5 minutes." "I am sorry," Darius, Patrick said, stepping back into the booth. "If you don't leave, I have to call the police." The note was very specific about trespassing. The gate clicked audibly, locking the electronic deadbolt. Darius stood there in the snow. He was locked out of his house, locked out of his bank account, and now locked out of society. He turned around and looked at the long, empty road stretching out before him. The sun was setting, the temperature was dropping to single digits. And for the first time in 38 years, Darius Holloway was completely and utterly alone. Back at the house, Tiffany was still reading the documents. She had found something else, a small addendum on the last page. It wasn't about the rent. It was about her. Item 3. She read, her voice shaking. Personal loan for wedding expenses dated June 2018. Payee Tiffany Holloway. Amount $80,000. Note: this sum was disbursed as a conditional loan forgivable only upon 10 years of marriage. Current status: default due to breach of conduct clause. She gasped. He had categorized the wedding as a loan, and he had a breach of conduct clause. She remembered signing a stack of papers the week before the wedding. She thought they were prenups. She hadn't read them. Breach of conduct, she whispered, reading the fine print. Defined as any act of verbal abuse, public humiliation, or demand for the alienation of the lender from his property. She dropped the paper. She realized then that I hadn't just reacted to her insult at the party. I had been waiting for it. I had set a trap 5 years ago, baited it with luxury, and waited for her true nature to snap it shut. And snap it shut she did. Now she owed me $80,000 for a party that lasted 6 hours. She looked around the empty dark room. The shadows were lengthening. She was trapped in a cold box with a debt she couldn't pay, married to a man who couldn't protect her, fighting an enemy she couldn't see. Happy Christmas. Tiffany, I whispered to the ocean breeze in Florida. The bill has finally come due. When you back a rat into a corner, it doesn't surrender. It bites. And when you back a narcissist into a corner, she doesn't apologize. She opens Instagram. Tiffany realized she couldn't beat me in the court of law. The lease was ironclad. The debts were documented. The house was mine. So she decided to drag me into the only court where evidence doesn't matter. Only emotions do. The court of public opinion. I sat on my balcony in Florida, the humid air sticking to my skin, watching the notifications light up on my iPad. I still followed Tiffany. She hadn't blocked me yet because she wanted me to see this. She wanted me to hurt. At 10 in the morning, right after they were kicked out of the country club, Tiffany went live. She didn't do it from the freezing living room. No, that would look too desperate. She went to the local Starbucks, the one with the good lighting, and set up her phone. She put on a thick layer of foundation to make herself look pale, but not too pale. She wore a simple gray sweater, trying to look humble. It was a costume. She was dressing up as the grieving daughter-in-law. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera. She sniffled, wiping away a tear that I knew she had manufactured with eye drops. "I haven't been online much lately because, well, our family is going through a crisis." She paused for dramatic effect. The viewer count started to tick up. 100, 200, 500. People love a tragedy, especially in Lake Forest. It is about Darius's dad, Mac. She continued, her voice trembling. "We didn't want to make this public, but we are desperate. He has been battling some cognitive issues for a while now. Dementia is a cruel disease, guys. It turns the people you love into strangers." I took a sip of my iced tea. Dementia. That was her angle. She wasn't just calling me mean. She was calling me crazy. She was invalidating every legal move I made by claiming I didn't know what I was doing. 2 days ago, he had a severe episode. She lied, looking straight into the lens. He became aggressive. He started shouting about money, about things that weren't real, and then he just vanished. He locked us out of the accounts, turned off the heat in the house in the middle of winter, and disappeared. We are terrified. We don't know if he is safe. We don't know if he is eating. We just want him home. Darius sat next to her in the video. He looked genuinely miserable, but not for the reason she claimed. He looked miserable because he was hungry and cold, but on camera his silence looked like grief. He nodded when she nudged him. "Yeah," Darius mumbled. "We just want you home, Dad. Please, if anyone sees him, let us know. He is 71. He is confused. He might be a danger to himself." The comments started rolling in. They were brutal. "Oh my God, Tiff, I am so sorry," wrote one user. "Elderly people can be so difficult," wrote another. "My grandpa did this. Stay strong. How could he cut off the heat that is so dangerous for you guys? Praying for you." Within 2 hours, the video had 10,000 views. It was being shared in the community Facebook groups. My phone started ringing with calls from old neighbors, people who hadn't spoken to me in years, leaving voicemails telling me to go home and stop torturing my poor children. I was the villain. In the span of a morning, she had turned 40 years of my reputation into dust. She had painted me as a senile, cruel old man who was freezing his family out of spite. I could have commented. I could have posted the legal documents. But I knew the internet. People don't read documents, they watch videos. They react to what they see. So I decided to give them something to see. Tiffany forgot one thing. She forgot that I was a contractor. I didn't just build the house, I wired it. I installed the security system myself. And unlike the thermostat or the Wi-Fi, the internal security cameras recorded to a local hard drive that backed up to a cloud server I controlled. I opened my laptop. I went to the folder labeled Christmas Eve. There it was, the dinner. The high-definition footage of the dining room, the audio was crystal clear. I watched it again. I watched myself sitting at the folding table. I watched Tiffany snatch the savings book from Maya. I watched her laugh. I heard her voice sharp and cruel cutting through the room. The best Christmas present would be if you disappeared without a trace. Banish yourself. You are boring. You are in the way. I heard Darius agree with her. I heard the guests laugh. I didn't edit the video. I didn't add music or captions. The truth doesn't need filters. I created an anonymous account on the local community forum. It was the same forum where everyone was currently bashing me. I titled the post, "The Truth About the Poor Holloway Family." I hit upload. It took 3 minutes for the file to process. 3 minutes where I held the fate of my son and his wife in my hands. But my hands didn't shake. I remembered the coldness in Tiffany's eyes when she told me to die. I remembered the silence of my son when I needed him most. I clicked post. Then I waited. Back at the Starbucks, Tiffany was feeling good. She was reading the supportive comments to Darius. "Look, babe," she said, "the sympathy vote is working. Someone just offered to start a GoFundMe for us. We can use that cash to get a hotel tonight." She refreshed her feed. Suddenly a notification popped up. Someone had tagged her in a new post, then another, then 10 more. "What is this?" she muttered. She tapped the notification. It opened the video I had just uploaded. Her face went pale. The sound of her own voice, screeching and hateful, filled the coffee shop. $500. That won't even buy the strap for the Birkin bag I want. She tried to pause it, but her hands were shaking too hard. "Dad, this is embarrassing. You are so cheap, it is actually painful." The people at the table next to them looked over. They recognized the voice. They looked at the video on their own phones. Then they looked at Tiffany. The pity in their eyes vanished, replaced by disgust. Tiffany watched the comment section on her own post explode. The tide didn't just turn. It crashed over her head. "Wait, this is the woman who just said he was senile," wrote one user. "She literally told him to disappear. He didn't wander off. He left because she kicked him out. Look at how she treats him. That is elder abuse." Wow. Just wow. The audacity to ask for donations after drinking $200 wine. The hearts turned into angry emojis. The messages of support turned into insults. Hashtag Team Mac started trending locally. Tiffany frantically tried to delete the comments. She tried to turn off the replies, but it was too late. The internet is forever. The video had already been downloaded and re-uploaded on TikTok, Twitter, and Reddit. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "Who posted this? How did they get this?" She looked at Darius. He was staring at the screen, watching himself on video tell his own father to go away. He looked sick. "We have to go," Darius said, pulling his hood up. People are staring. But before they could stand up, Tiffany's phone rang. It wasn't a notification. It was a call. The caller ID flashed a name that made Tiffany's blood run cold. Samantha, CEO. It was her boss, the owner of the boutique PR firm where Tiffany worked as a senior brand strategist, a firm that prided itself on family values and ethical image consulting. Tiffany stared at the phone. She didn't want to answer. She knew what this call meant, but the ringing wouldn't stop. It was loud, insistent, like a fire alarm signaling the end of her career. She tapped the green button with a trembling finger. "Hello," she squeaked. Tiffany Samantha's voice was icy. "I just saw a video that was sent to our company's public inbox. About 50 times. Is that you?" Tiffany tried to speak, tried to spin it. "Samantha, listen, it is taken out of context. It is a deep fake. It is—" "Don't," Samantha cut her off. "Just don't. You are wearing the same sweater in that video as you are in your profile picture. Tiffany, we handle crisis management for clients. We don't become the crisis." There was a pause. A long, terrible pause. "I need you to come into the office immediately," Samantha said. "And bring your company laptop and badge. We need to have a very serious conversation about your future at this agency, or rather, your lack of one." The line went dead. Tiffany lowered the phone. She looked at Darius. The fake tears she had cried earlier were gone. Now real tears were forming. Tears of terror. "I think I just got fired," she whispered. Darius didn't comfort her. He couldn't. He was too busy reading a text message that had just popped up on his own phone. It was from his biggest client, a man I had introduced him to 5 years ago. "Darius," the text read. "Just saw the video. Disgusting. Cancel our meeting next week. I don't do business with people who treat their fathers like trash." They sat there in the coffee shop, surrounded by the smell of roasted beans and the sound of judgment. They were two pariahs, stripped of their narrative, stripped of their privacy, and soon stripped of their incomes. I closed my laptop in Florida. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. I felt a pang of sadness. I didn't enjoy destroying them. But a builder knows that sometimes you have to demolish a rotting structure before you can build anything new. The demolition was almost complete. Now came the cleanup. While the war between me and the ungrateful adults in my house was raging on the public stage, a much quieter, more important battle was taking place inside the freezing walls of 1402 Maple Drive. My son and his wife were so consumed by their own misery, so obsessed with their lost jobs and repossessed cars, that they forgot the one person who actually mattered. They forgot about Maya. My granddaughter is 8 years old, but she has the soul of an old woman and the eyes of a hawk. She had watched the chaos unfold with a quiet intelligence that she certainly didn't inherit from her mother. She saw the tow truck take the car. She saw the furniture movers take the television. She felt the temperature drop as the house went into lockdown. But unlike her parents, who sat around screaming and blaming the world, Maya took action. It was Wednesday afternoon. The house was hovering around 50 degrees. Darius and Tiffany were in the kitchen arguing over whose fault it was that they were down to their last can of soup. They were too busy pointing fingers to notice a small figure slipping down the hallway, clutching a heavy wool blanket and an iPad that had only 5% battery left. Maya knew the house better than they did. She knew that there was one spot in the library where the neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi signal drifted through the brick wall just enough to get a connection. I had taught her that trick a year ago when we were playing spies. I never thought she would have to use it to survive her own parents. I was sitting on the terrace of a private villa in Key West, Florida. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. The air smelled of salt water and the premium Cuban cigar I had just lit. I had a glass of aged rum on the table and a plate of fresh stone crabs. I was at peace. For the first time in 5 years, my shoulders didn't ache from carrying the weight of grown adults. Then, my personal tablet chimed. It was a specific ringtone, a silly cartoon sound that I had assigned to only one person. I put down my cigar immediately. I tapped the screen. The video connected, pixelated at first, then clearing up to show a small face wrapped in a gray scarf illuminated by the ghostly blue light of the screen. "Hi, Grandpa," Maya whispered. My heart broke and swelled at the same time. She looked cold, but her eyes were dry. She was a Holloway. She was tough. "Hello, my little spy," I said, keeping my voice warm and steady. "I see you found the signal spot." Maya nodded. "Mommy and Daddy are fighting again. They are yelling about the bank. It is really cold, Grandpa. My breath looks like dragon smoke." I leaned closer to the screen. "Listen to me, Maya. Are you hungry?" "No," she said. "I ate the granola bars you hid in my emergency backpack. And I have the juice boxes." "Good girl," I said. I had stashed a survival kit in her closet 3 months ago, telling her it was for a zombie apocalypse game. I knew this day was coming. Grandpa, she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Are you coming home? Mommy said you went crazy. She said you are lost. I sighed, looking out at the palm trees swaying in the warm breeze. I am not lost, sweetheart. I know exactly where I am, and I am not crazy. I am just teaching a class. A class, she asked. Yes, a very hard class for your parents. Sometimes adults act like children, Maya, and when they do, they have to go to timeout. Your mom and dad are in timeout right now. But it is cold in timeout, she said. I know, I said gently. And I am sorry about that, but listen to me closely. You are safe. Do you remember the promise? She nodded. The protocol. That is right. The protocol. If it gets too scary or if you run out of food, you call Uncle Sterling. Do you remember his number? 5550199, she recited. Perfect. Uncle Sterling has a key. He has a warm car. And he has a room set up for you at his house with a PlayStation and all the pizza you can eat. You just give the signal, and he will come get you. But only you, not your parents. Do you understand? Maya bit her lip. She looked back toward the kitchen door where the muffled sounds of Tiffany screaming were getting louder. Why can't you just fix it, Grandpa? You always fix it. Because, Sweet Pea, I said, feeling the weight of the truth. If I fix it this time, they will never learn how to fix it themselves, and I won't be around forever. I need to know that when I am gone, they can stand on their own 2 feet. Right now, they are crawling. Maya seemed to think about this. She was smart enough to understand that love sometimes looked like discipline. I miss you, she whispered. I miss you too, kiddo. Look at the view. I turned the camera around to show her the ocean, the golden light reflecting off the water, the palm trees. It is beautiful, she said. It is waiting for you, I promised. When this is over, when the lesson is learned, you and I are going to build the biggest sandcastle Florida has ever seen. Suddenly, the door to the library slammed open. Maya jumped, nearly dropping the iPad. Who are you talking to? Tiffany's voice screeched through the speaker. I saw the camera spin wildly as Maya tried to hide it. Then the image stabilized, but it wasn't Maya's sweet face anymore. It was Tiffany. She looked deranged. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was matted and greasy. She was wearing 3 sweaters and a pair of fingerless gloves. Her eyes were wild, rimmed with red, desperate circles. She looked like a woman who had stared into the abyss and found out the abyss required a credit card. Mac, she gasped, staring at the screen. Her eyes widened as she took in the background behind me. The sunset, the beach, the waiter walking by with a tray of drinks. You are at a resort, she stammered. Her shock quickly turned into a volcanic rage. We are freezing to death. We are eating canned soup, and you are at a resort. Hello, Tiffany, I said, taking a sip of my rum. You look terrible. Have you tried moisturizing? The cold air can be very drying for the skin. She screamed. It was a primal sound of frustration. How dare you? How dare you sit there and mock me? Do you have any idea what you have done? I lost my job. My car is gone. The internet is gone. I know, I said calmly. I canceled the subscriptions. You are a monster, she yelled, shaking the iPad. This is abuse. I am going to call the police. I am going to sue you for everything you have. You already tried that, I reminded her. And you failed. Because unlike you, Tiffany, I read the contracts before I signed them. She started to cry then. Ugly, desperate tears. Please, Mac, please just turn the power back on. I can't take it. It is too cold. I will do anything. I will apologize. I will let you sit at the main table next year. Just make it stop. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had isolated me in my own home. The woman who had treated me like a servant. The woman who had raised my son to be a spineless echo of her own vanity. I am not asking for a seat at the table, Tiffany, I said. I own the table. Give me the money, she shrieked, her mask slipping again. Just transfer the money. We are your family. No, I said. You are not family. Family protects each other. Family respects each other. You are a parasite that I have decided to surgically remove. Darius ran into the room then. He must have heard the screaming. Is that him? Is that Dad? Darius yelled, trying to grab the iPad from her. Dad, help us. Frank fired me. I have nowhere to go. I watched them fight over the screen, clawing at each other like crabs in a bucket. It was pathetic. It was tragic, and it was necessary. Tiffany yelled, getting her face back in the frame. You have to come back. You can't leave us like this. You have to disappear. Remember? You were supposed to disappear. I took a long drag of my cigar, letting the smoke curl around the lens of the camera. I looked her dead in the eye, my face calm and hard as granite. I distinctly remember your Christmas wish, Tiffany, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You told me the best present I could give you was to vanish without a trace. You said I was bringing down the vibe. I paused, letting the silence stretch across the 1,000 miles between us. Well, I am a man of my word. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I disappeared. And now I am doing exactly what you wanted. I raised my glass to the camera in a mock toast. I am enjoying the gift you gave me. But, she stammered. Merry Christmas, Tiffany, I said. I didn't wait for her response. I didn't wait for the begging. I tapped the red button on the screen. The connection severed. The window into their misery closed. I sat there for a moment in the silence of the Florida evening. My heart was beating a little faster, not from anger, but from the adrenaline of the execution. I picked up my phone and sent a text message to Sterling. Subject Operation Sandbox. Message: keep an eye on the granddaughter. If the temperature in the house drops below 45 tonight, extract her. Leave the parents. I put the phone down and looked at the ocean. The waves were crashing rhythmically against the shore. It was a beautiful sound. The sound of nature. The sound of consequences. Back in Chicago, the screen of the iPad went black. Tiffany stared at her own reflection in the dark glass. She saw a woman who had everything and lost it all because she couldn't keep her mouth shut. The battery icon in the corner flashed red once, then died. The connection was gone. The only light left in the room was the fading gray of the winter dusk, and the cold, which had been waiting patiently in the corners, began to move in for the kill. Hunger has a way of clarifying things. It strips away pride. It dissolves arrogance. And after 4 days in a freezing house with nothing to eat but canned beans and crackers, my son and his wife finally reached their breaking point. I was waiting for it. I knew the timeline. I knew that the human spirit is strong, but the human stomach is weak, especially when that stomach is used to filet mignon and truffle risotto. On Thursday morning, a notification popped up on my iPad in Florida. It was an email from Darius. The subject line was simply Dad. I didn't open it immediately. I let it sit there for an hour while I finished my breakfast. I wanted them to sweat. I wanted them to stare at their screens, refreshing the inbox, wondering if I had finally blocked them for good. When I finally opened it, I almost laughed out loud. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Dear Dad, it read. We have been doing a lot of thinking. We are sorry for the misunderstanding on Christmas Eve. We were stressed. We didn't mean what we said. We love you. We miss you. Please, come home. Let's talk about this like a family. We want to make it right. It was a lie. Every word of it. They didn't miss me. They missed my wallet. They missed the heat. They missed the status I provided. But I wasn't looking for sincerity. I was looking for submission. And this email was a white flag. I decided to play along. But in my world, surrender comes with conditions. I typed out a reply. It was short. It was precise. I will come to the house on Friday evening at 6 o'clock, I wrote. We will have dinner. But this will not be a catered meal. Tiffany will cook. She will make your mother's gumbo. From scratch. If the meal is made with respect, we can discuss the future of your tenancy. I hit send. I knew exactly what I was asking. My late wife Ruby was a legend in the kitchen. Her gumbo was not just a soup. It was a labor of love. It took 4 hours to make the roux properly. It required patience, attention, and soul, 3 things Tiffany did not possess. Asking her to cook it was not just a test of her culinary skills, it was a test of her humility. Back in Lake Forest, the reaction was exactly what I expected. Tiffany read the email and threw her phone across the room. He wants me to cook, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the cold kitchen. That heavy, greasy stew. He wants me to slave over a stove for 4 hours. We have to do it, Tiff, Darius said. He was shivering in his coat, rubbing his hands together. He said we can discuss the tenancy. That means he might let us stay. He might turn the power back on. Just make the soup, please. Tiffany paced around the kitchen island. She looked at her manicured nails, or what was left of them after days of anxiety biting. She looked at the empty pantry. Fine, she hissed. I will make his stupid gumbo. But he is going to regret making me do this. They had to walk to the grocery store because their cars were gone. They spent the last of their cash, the final $20, on chicken flour and spices. They looked like refugees as they trudged back through the snow carrying plastic bags, their expensive coats, the only reminder of who they used to be. Friday afternoon arrived. The house was still 50 degrees. Tiffany stood in the kitchen wearing a parka and a pair of Ugg boots. She had pulled up a recipe online because she had never bothered to learn Ruby's recipe, even though Ruby had tried to teach her a dozen times. She threw the butter into the pot. She turned the gas burner on high. She didn't have the patience to let the butter melt slowly. She wanted this over with. "I hate him," she muttered as she dumped the flour in. "I hate him so much." The flour burned almost instantly. A cloud of black smoke rose up, filling the kitchen with the acrid smell of scorched wheat. Darius ran in coughing. "You are burning it," he yelled. "You have to stir it constantly. Mom used to stir it for an hour." "Shut up," Tiffany screamed, slamming the wooden spoon against the pot. "Don't you dare compare me to your mother. I am doing this for you." She didn't start over. She didn't care. She poured the chicken broth into the burnt flour. The mixture turned a sickly gray color instead of the rich chocolate brown it was supposed to be. It looked like dirty dishwater. Then came the seasoning. This was where the malice truly took over. Tiffany looked at the spice rack. She saw the cayenne pepper. She saw the salt. "He likes it spicy, does he?" She whispered, a cruel smile twisting her lips. She grabbed the container of cayenne. She didn't measure a teaspoon. She took the lid off and dumped half the jar into the pot. The red powder floated on top like an oil slick. Then the salt. She poured it in until the shaker was empty. "Here is your flavor, Mac," she said to the bubbling pot. "Hope you have high blood pressure." She wasn't cooking dinner. She was brewing poison. She wanted me to take one bite and choke. She wanted to punish me for humiliating her. She thought that if she served me this inedible sludge, it would be a power move. A way to say, you can force me to cook, but you can't force me to care. Darius watched her from the doorway. He saw her dump the salt. He saw the hate in her eyes. He should have stopped her. He should have said, "Tiff, don't do this. This is our last chance." But he didn't. He was too afraid of her anger. He was a coward to the end. "Smells strong," Darius said weakly. "It is authentic," Tiffany snapped. "Go set the table. Use the good china. If he wants a show, we will give him a show." They set the dining room table. They lit candles not for romance, but because the chandelier wouldn't turn on. They put on their best clothes, which were wrinkled and smelled slightly of mildew because they couldn't do laundry. At 5:55, they sat down to wait. The pot of gumbo sat in the center of the table. It smelled of burnt flour and aggressive pepper. It was a weapon in a porcelain bowl. He is going to eat this, and he is going to turn the power back on Tiffany, rehearsed. And then once we have access to the accounts again, we are putting him in a home. A locked home. 6 o'clock came. They heard a car pull up in the driveway. Not a taxi. A heavy engine. Then another car. "He is here," Darius whispered. He adjusted his tie. "Remember, smile. Be nice. Until we get the money." Tiffany took a deep breath. She forced her face into a mask of repentance. She clasped her hands on the table. The doorbell rang. Darius got up and walked to the door. He opened it wide, ready to welcome the prodigal father. "Welcome home, Dad," Darius said, putting on his best salesman smile. I stood on the porch. I was wearing my long wool coat and a fedora. I looked rested. I looked healthy. I looked like a man who had spent the week eating fresh seafood and sleeping in Egyptian cotton sheets. But I didn't step inside immediately. And I wasn't alone. Behind me stood two men. One was Officer Miller, the same policeman who had refused to file the missing person report. He was in full uniform, his hands resting on his belt. The other man was wearing a suit and holding a laser measuring device and a clipboard. His name was Mr. Jenkins. He was the most ruthless real estate appraiser in Lake County. Dad Darius stammered, his smile faltering. Who are these people? We made dinner. Just for us." I stepped into the foyer. I didn't take off my coat. I sniffed the air. The smell of the burnt gumbo hit me. It smelled like hate. "I see you cooked," I said, looking past Darius to where Tiffany was sitting at the table, frozen in shock. "Yes," Tiffany called out, standing up quickly. "I made gumbo, just like Ruby used to make. Come sit down, Mac. Let's eat." I walked into the dining room. I looked at the gray, sludge-like liquid in the bowl. I could see the clumps of undissolved cayenne pepper floating on the surface. It was an insult to my wife's memory. Officer Miller and Mr. Jenkins followed me in. They stood by the wall, silent sentinels. I walked up to the table. I dipped a spoon into the pot. Tiffany held her breath, waiting for me to taste it, waiting for me to choke. I lifted the spoon, but I didn't put it in my mouth. I slowly poured the liquid back into the bowl. The splash echoed in the silent room. "You put too much salt in it, Tiffany," I said softly. "I can smell it from here. And you burned the roux. Ruby would have thrown this in the trash." Tiffany's face turned red. "I worked hard on that," she yelled, dropping the act. "You ungrateful old man." I turned to Mr. Jenkins. "Go ahead, Jenkins," I said. "Measure the square footage. I want this property listed on the market by Monday morning." "Listed?" Darius gasped. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "You said we could discuss the tenancy." "We are discussing it," I said. "Your tenancy is over." I turned to Officer Miller. "Officer," I said, "I am the owner of this property. These two individuals are trespassing. They have no lease. They have no permission to be here. And as you can see from the condition of the house, they are negligent occupants." Officer Miller stepped forward. He pulled a pair of folded documents from his pocket. "Darius Holloway." Tiffany Holloway Miller said, his voice booming in the small room. "You are hereby served with an immediate eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." Tiffany screamed. She grabbed the bowl of gumbo, the scalding, spicy, burnt poison she had made, and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the wall, splattering gray sludge all over the expensive wallpaper I had installed last year. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out of my house!" I looked at the stain on the wall. I looked at my son, who was cowering in the corner. "It is not your house, Tiffany," I said calmly. "It never was. And now you don't even have a kitchen to burn dinner in." I turned to the appraiser. "Make sure to deduct the cost of the wallpaper from their security deposit," I said. "Oh, wait, they didn't pay a deposit. Deduct it from their inheritance." I walked out of the dining room, leaving them with the police, the appraiser, and the smell of their own failure. The dinner party was over. The eviction had begun. The dining room was silent save for the rhythmic electronic beep of Mr. Jenkins's laser distance measurer. That sound, sharp and clinical, cut through the heavy atmosphere like a knife. My son Darius and his wife Tiffany sat at the table, their hands trembling slightly, staring at the bowl of gray burnt gumbo that sat in the center of the pristine tablecloth. They looked like two children who had been sent to the principal's office, terrified and confused, waiting for a scolding that they hoped would end with a hug. But I wasn't there to hug them. I stood near the archway, my coat still buttoned to my chin, my leather gloves still on my hands. I watched Mr. Jenkins move around the room. He was a professional. He ignored the tension. He ignored the smell of scorched flour in desperation. He simply pointed his laser at the far wall, waited for the beep, and wrote a number down on his clipboard. "Dad," Darius said, his voice cracking. "Please, sit down. The soup is getting cold." I looked at the soup. I looked at the layer of cayenne pepper floating on top like an oil slick. I looked at the blackened bits of chicken that bobbed in the sludge. It was an insult to the memory of the woman who had designed this kitchen. "I am not hungry," I said. My voice was calm, devoid of any warmth. "And I don't drink wine with tenants who are $200,000 in debt to me." Tiffany's head snapped up. Her eyes were red-rimmed with dark circles. The mask of the dutiful daughter-in-law was slipping fast. "Tenants," she repeated, her voice rising. "Is that what we are to you, tenants? We are your family, Mac. We are the mother and father of your grandchild." Mr. Jenkins walked past the table. "Excuse me, ma'am," he muttered, pointing his laser at the window behind her head. "Beep!" Tiffany slammed her hand down on the table. The silverware rattled. "Stop it!" she screamed. "Stop that noise! Who is this man? Why is he measuring my dining room?" I took a step forward. "He is measuring the square footage. Tiffany, we need accurate numbers for the listing. When you sell a property of this magnitude, the details matter." The word hung in the air for a second. Sell. Tiffany stood up so fast her chair fell backward onto the floor, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. She grabbed the bowl of gumbo, the poison she had cooked, to mock me, and hurled it across the room. The bowl shattered against the silk wallpaper I had imported from France. The gray sludge exploded outward, dripping down the wall in long, ugly streaks. "You are selling the house," she shrieked. "You tricked us. You made me cook this stupid soup just to humiliate me, and now you are telling me you are selling our home." "It is not your home," I said, my voice dropping an octave. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I had the truth on my side. "You can't do this," she yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You can't just sell it out from under us." "What about Maya? Are you going to throw your own granddaughter onto the street? Is that the kind of man you are? You are going to make an 8-year-old girl homeless just to prove a point." There it was, the human shield. I knew she would use Maya. It was her only card left to play. Darius stood up too, trying to grab her arm. "Tiff, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down." She pushed him away. "Your father is a monster." "Darius, look at him. He is enjoying this." I reached into my inside pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out something far more dangerous. A thick, folded stack of bank statements. I threw them onto the table. They landed with a heavy thud right next to the empty spot where the gumbo bowl had been. "Pick it up," I said. Tiffany breathed heavily, her chest heaving. She looked at the papers. She didn't move. "Pick it up," I roared. The sound of my voice made Darius jump. Tiffany reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the stack. "Read the highlighted figure on the bottom of the first page," I commanded. She looked at the paper. It was a summary of expenses for the property at 1402 Maple Drive for the last 5 years. $480,000, she whispered. "That is correct," I said, stepping closer to the table. $480,000. That is the mortgage payments, the property taxes, the insurance, the landscaping, the pool maintenance, the heating, the repairs, the new roof I put on last year. That is the cost of living in this castle you claim is yours." I pointed at Darius. "Now tell me, son, how much have you contributed to that number? How much of your own money have you put into this house in 5 years? Darius looked down at his shoes. "Nothing," he whispered. "Speak up," I barked. "Nothing." Darius yelled, tears streaming down his face. "We paid nothing." "Okay, are you happy? We are leeches. Is that what you want to hear?" I looked back at Tiffany. She was still holding the paper, staring at the number as if it were a foreign language. "You scream about rights," I said to her. "You scream about family. But for 5 years you have lived here like a queen. You threw parties on my dime. You insulted my friends in my living room. You treated me like a servant in a house that I built with my own sweat and blood." I leaned in close to her. "You say I am making Maya homeless? No, Tiffany. You did that. You spent every dollar I gave you on clothes and cars and vanity. You didn't save a dime. You didn't prepare. You assumed the gravy train would run forever. Well, the train has stopped, and you are standing on the tracks." Tiffany crumpled the paper in her hand. She looked at me with pure venom. "We won't leave," she hissed. "You can't make us. Squatters' rights. We have established residency. It takes months to evict someone in Illinois. We will drag this out in court. We will stay here until the sheriff drags us out." I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who plays chess while his opponent is playing checkers. "I thought you might say that," I said. "That is why I brought Officer Miller." I stepped aside. Officer Miller, who had been standing silently by the door, stepped into the light of the chandelier. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't friendly. He was the embodiment of the law. He walked up to the table. He didn't look at the gumbo stain on the wall. He looked directly at Darius and Tiffany. "Darius Holloway." "Tiffany Holloway Miller," said his voice deep and authoritative. He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't a standard eviction notice. It was something much more severe. "You are hereby served with an emergency order of protection and removal," Miller said, handing the paper to Darius. Darius looked at the document. His hands shook so hard the paper rattled. "Order of protection," Darius stammered. "Dad, why we didn't hit you?" Miller answered for me. "Based on the video evidence provided by Mr. Holloway showing verbal abuse, intimidation, and threats to his mental well-being coupled with the intentional destruction of property witnessed here tonight referring to the soup on the wall, a judge has granted an emergency order." Miller paused, letting the words sink in. "This house is the primary residence of Mr. Marcus Holloway. You are considered guests who have become hostile. Under Illinois law regarding domestic disturbances involving the elderly, you are not tenants entitled to a 30-day notice. You are aggressors." Tiffany's mouth fell open. She looked from Miller to me. She realized her threat of a long court battle had just evaporated. "What does that mean?" she whispered. Miller looked at his watch. It means the judge has given you a grace period of exactly 7 days to vacate the premises entirely, Miller said. If you are still on this property at 6 p.m. next Friday, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing and violation of a protective order. 7 days. Darius cried out, "But we have nowhere to go. We have no money." "Dad, you can't do this." I walked over to the window. I looked out at the dark front yard. I could see the reflection of the room in the glass. I saw my son, a grown man of 38, crying because he finally had to face the real world. I saw Tiffany, a woman who thought she was untouchable, realizing she was about to be touched by the cold hand of poverty. "You have 7 days," I said to the reflection in the glass. "I suggest you start packing. And Tiffany..." She looked up at my back. "Don't take the curtains," I said. "I paid for those too." I turned around and walked toward the door. Mr. Jenkins followed me, tucking his clipboard under his arm. Officer Miller stayed behind for a moment to ensure they didn't destroy anything else. As I stepped out onto the porch, the cold night air hit my face. It felt good. It felt clean. Behind me inside the house, I heard the sound of Tiffany screaming again. But this time the door was closed. The sound was muffled. It was just noise. And for the first time in years, it wasn't my problem anymore. Desperation is a dangerous drug. It makes you hallucinate. It makes you believe that the impossible is possible and that the immoral is necessary. My son Darius and his wife Tiffany were intoxicated with desperation. They had been served with an eviction notice. They had 7 days to leave the castle, but instead of packing boxes, they decided to burn the castle down. They had no money for a lawyer. No reputable attorney would take their case because it had no merit. But when you are desperate, you don't look for reputation. You look for a shark. Darius found a lawyer named Saul Sterling, a man whose office was located in a strip mall next to a vape shop. Saul didn't care about the truth. He cared about the retainer fee. To pay Saul, Darius did something that made my stomach churn when I found out later. He didn't get a job. He didn't sell his watch. He went to a predatory lender, a loan shark in a cheap suit who charged 40% interest a week. Darius borrowed $10,000 against a future inheritance that he was not even guaranteed to get. He bet his life against my death. On Monday morning, just 4 days before the eviction deadline, I was served with a lawsuit. I was sitting in my hotel suite in Chicago preparing for the final walkthrough of the house when a process server handed me the thick envelope. I opened it. The header read, "In re the estate and person of Marcus Holloway." The petition was for an emergency conservatorship. I read the allegations. They were breathtaking in their cruelty. Darius was claiming that I, his father, was suffering from acute senile dementia. He claimed that my decision to evict them to sell the house and to cut off their financial support was not a rational choice but a symptom of cognitive decline. He cited my sudden move to Florida as evidence of wandering. He cited my refusal to pay his bills as paranoia. He was asking the court to strip me of my rights. He wanted to be appointed as my legal guardian. He wanted full control of my bank accounts, my trust, and my medical decisions. He wanted to lock me away in a facility so he could move back into my house and spend my money. It was the ultimate betrayal. He wasn't just trying to steal my wallet, he was trying to steal my freedom. The hearing was scheduled for Wednesday. Emergency docket. I walked into the Cook County Courthouse wearing my best navy blue suit. I didn't hire a strip mall lawyer. I brought my longtime corporate attorney, a woman named Catherine, who had handled my business mergers for 30 years. She looked at Darius's lawyer like a lioness looks at a limping gazelle. Darius was sitting at the plaintiff's table. He looked terrible. His suit was wrinkled. He had dark circles under his eyes. Tiffany was sitting in the gallery behind him, whispering in his ear. She was the architect of this, I knew. She was the one who convinced him that I was the problem. She was the one who told him that if they could just prove I was crazy, the nightmare would end and the money would flow again. The bailiff called the court to order. All rise. The Honorable Judge William Jefferson entered. Judge Jefferson was a black man about my age. I knew of him. He was a man who had worked his way up from the South Side just like me. He had hands that looked like they had done real work before they held a gavel. He sat down, adjusted his glasses, and looked at the file. Then he looked at Darius. Then he looked at me. Mr. Sterling, the judge, said to Darius's lawyer, "You are alleging that Mr. Holloway is incapacitated. You have the floor. Darius's lawyer stood up. He was loud. He was theatrical. Your Honor, he began waving his arms. We are here to save a vulnerable elderly man from himself. Marcus Holloway is 71 years old. Up until last week, he was a loving, generous father. Suddenly, overnight, he snapped. He turned off the heat in his family's home in the middle of winter. He cut off all financial support to his only son. He fled the state. These are not the actions of a sane man. These are the actions of a mind in decline. He pointed at me. He is hoarding his assets, Your Honor. He is spending recklessly on luxury resorts while his grandchildren freeze. We are asking the court to step in. We are asking you to grant Darius Holloway temporary guardianship to protect the estate and ensure that Mr. Holloway receives the medical care he obviously needs. Darius sat there nodding. He actually believed it. He had convinced himself that my refusal to be his victim was a sign of my insanity. The judge listened. He didn't take notes. He just watched Darius. Is that all? Judge Jefferson asked. The lawyer sat down looking smug. Mr. Holloway, the judge said to me. Do you wish to speak? Catherine started to stand up, but I put a hand on her arm. I wanted to do this myself. Yes, Your Honor, I said. I stood up. I didn't need the table for support. I stood tall. I walked to the center of the courtroom. I buttoned my jacket. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and steady. My son claims I am confused. He claims I don't know the value of $1. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This morning at 8 a.m., I rebalanced my investment portfolio, I said. I moved 15% of my assets from high-risk tech stocks into municipal bonds because I anticipate a market correction in the third quarter. The yield on those bonds is 4.2%. I also authorized the sale of a commercial warehouse I own in Bronzeville with a closing price of $3.5 million. I negotiated the closing cost down by 2%. I looked at Darius. He was staring at me, mouth open. I know exactly how much money I have. Your Honor, I continued, down to the penny, and I know exactly where it goes. For the last 5 years, a large portion of it went to supporting a 38-year-old man who refused to work. I turned back to the judge. Cutting him off wasn't a symptom of dementia, Your Honor. It was a moment of clarity. It was the sanest thing I have ever done. I realized that by giving him everything I was teaching him nothing. I am not hoarding my assets. I am protecting them from parasites. The courtroom was silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. Darius's lawyer jumped up. Objection. He is disparaging the plaintiff. Overruled, Judge Jefferson snapped. He leaned forward, staring at Darius over the rim of his glasses. Mr. Darius Holloway, the judge said, stand up. Darius stood up slowly. His legs were shaking. Son, the judge said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy. I have read the motion. You are asking me to declare your father incompetent because he stopped paying your bills. Well, yes, Darius stammered. It is not just the bills. It is the behavior. It is erratic. The judge laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Erratic. The judge picked up the file. I see a man who built a construction empire. I see a man who has a better grasp of his finances than this court does. And then I look at you. The judge opened another folder on his desk. I ran a background check on you this morning, Mr. Holloway. It is standard procedure in guardianship cases. Do you know what I found? Darius shook his head, sweating. I found a man with 3 maxed-out credit cards, a repossessed vehicle, and a credit score that is currently in free fall, the judge said. And you want to be in charge of his money. That is because of him, Darius yelled, pointing at me. He cut me off. Exactly. The judge slammed his hand on the bench. He cut you off. And you collapsed. That doesn't make him crazy, son. It makes you incompetent. The judge closed the file. It made a sound like a gunshot in the quiet room. This petition is frivolous, Judge Jefferson declared. It is a waste of this court's time and a shameful attempt to use the legal system to bully an elder. I deny the motion for conservatorship. I am dismissing this case with prejudice, which means you cannot bring it back to my courtroom ever again. Darius slumped into his chair. He looked at Tiffany. She was pale, her hands covering her mouth. But I am not done, the judge said. He looked at me. Mr. Holloway, did you incur legal fees to defend yourself against this nonsense today? Yes. Your Honor, I said, my attorney charges $600 an hour. The judge nodded. I am ordering the plaintiff Darius Holloway to pay the full legal costs of the defendant Judge Jefferson ruled. Payment is due within 30 days. The gavel banged. Case dismissed. Darius sat there frozen. He had walked in hoping to get control of millions. He was walking out with a debt he couldn't pay. We walked out of the courtroom. Darius ran after me in the hallway. "Dad!" "Wait!" he cried. I stopped and turned around. Catherine stood next to me, checking her watch. "Dad, you can't let him do this," Darius pleaded. "I can't pay your lawyer. I don't have any money. I borrowed money just to hire my guy. I am in a hole, Dad. A deep hole." I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes. It was real fear. The fear of a man who realizes the safety net is gone and the ground is very hard. "You dug the hole, Darius," I said. "I suggest you start climbing." "But the eviction," he cried. "We have to leave by Friday." "Where will we go?" I adjusted my cufflinks. "I hear the shelter on 12th Street has openings," I said, "but get there early." "The line starts at 4. I walked away. I walked toward the elevator. But as the doors closed, I saw something that chilled me. Standing at the end of the hallway, watching Darius, was a man in a leather jacket. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a bailiff. He was holding a motorcycle helmet. He was looking at Darius with the kind of patience a predator has when it knows the prey is trapped. It was the loan shark's collector. Darius had borrowed money to sue me. He lost. Now he owed me. He owed the court. And he owed a man who didn't send invoices but sent people to break legs. The clock was ticking. 4 days left until eviction. But for Darius, the real danger wasn't losing the house. It was what was waiting for him in the parking lot. The sound of packing tape screeching off a roll is the ugliest sound in the world when you are the one leaving a mansion you thought was yours. It is a sharp, tearing noise that echoes off empty walls, signaling the end of an era. Friday arrived with the gray, heavy sky of a Chicago winter afternoon. The deadline set by the court was 6 o'clock in the evening. It was currently 4:30. For the last 2 days, my son Darius and his wife Tiffany had been frantic. They didn't have the money to hire a professional moving crew. Those white glove services that pack your china in bubble wrap and hang your clothes in wardrobe boxes cost thousands of dollars. Darius and Tiffany had exactly $0, so they had to do it the old-fashioned way. The way I did it when I was 22, they had to beg, borrow, and scavenge. They went behind liquor stores to find discarded cardboard boxes. They bought the cheapest rolls of tape from the dollar store. And they rented the smallest, most beat-up moving truck available, a vehicle that smelled of stale cigarettes and regret. I sat in the hallway on a folding chair I had brought with me, watching them. I was the supervisor. I was the timekeeper. I was the ghost of their future haunting their present. Darius looked like a broken man. He was wearing his expensive Italian suit trousers, but they were stained with dust and grime. His dress shirt was soaked with sweat despite the house being 50 degrees. He was struggling to lift a box of books. He had never lifted anything heavier than a golf club in 10 years. I watched him stumble, his knees buckling under the weight. "Lift with your legs, son, not your back," I said quietly. He didn't answer. He just grunted and shoved the box toward the door. Tiffany was in a different state of mind. She wasn't broken. She was volatile. She was moving through the house like a tornado, throwing things into black garbage bags. Her designer dresses, her silk scarves, her collection of imported shoes, she was stuffing them into trash bags as if they were garbage. "I hate this house," she screamed, ripping a curtain rod off the wall in the guest room. "I hate every inch of this place. It is a prison." I stood up. "Leave the hardware, Tiffany," I said. "That is property of the estate." She spun around, her eyes wild. "Estate. It is just a house, Mac. A house you are stealing from us." She grabbed a vase from the console table. It was a blue porcelain vase I had bought in Ming Dynasty style. It wasn't an antique, but it was beautiful. She held it over her head, her knuckles white. "I should smash everything," she hissed. "I should leave you nothing but a pile of broken glass." "If I can't live here, why should you get to sell it? Why should you get to profit off our misery?" I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her with the calm detachment of an insurance adjuster. "Go ahead," I said. She paused, confused. She expected me to beg. She expected me to dive in front of the vase. "Smash it," I continued. "Throw it against the wall. And while you are at it, take a hammer to the countertops. Break the windows. destroy the place. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the banking app. But before you do, I said, let me remind you of the terms of Maya's trust fund. Tiffany froze. The vase hovered in the air. The trust is revocable, I explained. It is fully discretionary. That means I decide how much goes in, and I decide how much comes out. Right now, there is enough in there to pay for Maya to go to Harvard, buy a house, and start a business. I took a step closer to her. But every dollar of damage you cause today, I will deduct from that fund. If you break that vase, that is $500 out of Maya's pocket. If you scratch those floors, that is $3,000. If you touch that chandelier, I pointed up to the crystal fixture hanging above us. That is $15,000. That is a semester of college. So go ahead, Tiffany. Smash it. You aren't hurting me. You are robbing your own daughter. You are taking money from her future to satisfy your temper tantrum today. Is that the kind of mother you are? Tiffany lowered the vase. Her chest was heaving. She looked up at the chandelier, then down at the trash bags at her feet. She realized she was trapped. Even in her exit, she was still under my financial control. She set the vase down on the table with a loud clatter. She didn't break it. She just started to cry. It was a defeated, whimpering sound. I hate you, she whispered. I know I said. Now finish packing. You have 45 minutes. The last hour was a blur of frantic activity. They dragged their mattresses down the stairs because they couldn't afford to leave the beds behind. They scratched the walls, but I let it slide. I could fix drywall. I couldn't fix their character. At 5:55, the house was empty. It echoed with the hollow sound that only empty houses have. The floors were scuffed. There was trash in the corners, but the structure was still there. The bones of the house were strong. Darius walked out the front door carrying the last box. It was a box of his trophies. Participation trophies from charity golf tournaments. Awards for best dressed at galas. Meaningless plastic statues that celebrated a life of pretending. He walked down the driveway to the rental truck. It was parked crookedly, blocking part of the sidewalk. I followed them out. The sun had set and the street lights were flickering on. And then the audience arrived. During the 5 years Tiffany had lived here, she had made it her mission to be the queen of the neighborhood. She had bragged to Mrs. Higgins across the street about her trips to Paris. She had looked down her nose at the mailman. She had made a show of being the wealthiest, most perfect woman on the block. Now Mrs. Higgins was standing on her porch wrapped in a shawl, drinking tea. The man from 2 doors down was walking his dog, walking very slowly. Curtains in the windows of the houses across the street were twitching. They were watching. They were watching the Queen of Lake Forest load her life into a dirty, dented rental truck. They saw the garbage bags full of clothes. They saw Darius sweating in his ruined suit. They saw the reality behind the Instagram filters. Tiffany saw them too. She froze by the back of the truck. She pulled her hood up, trying to hide her face. She tried to make herself small, but you can't hide when you are standing under a street lamp next to a U-Haul. "Hey, Tiffany," Mrs. Higgins called out. Her voice was cheerful, deceptively friendly. Moving out, Tiffany didn't answer. She threw a bag into the truck and slammed the metal door shut. "We are just renovating," Darius yelled back, his voice cracking. A lie. A pathetic, obvious lie. "We are staying at a hotel for a while," Mrs. Higgins nodded, sipping her tea. "Of course, dear. Good luck with the renovations." She knew. Everyone knew. The video of Tiffany screaming had circulated through the neighborhood group chat days ago. This was the season finale of the drama, and they had front row seats. I stood on the porch, checking my watch. 6 o'clock. "Time is up," I said. Darius looked at me one last time. He looked at the house. He looked at the window of his bedroom, the room where he had slept until noon every day, the room where he had plotted to declare me insane. "Dad," he said softly, "where are we supposed to go tonight?" "The shelter is full." I looked at him. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest. He was my son, but I had to be strong. If I caught him now, he would never learn to fly. "There is a Motel 6 out on the interstate," I said. "They take cash. It is $60 a night." "You have the money from the pawn shop, right?" Darius nodded. He had pawned his Rolex yesterday. I knew because the pawn shop owner was my cousin. "Good," I said. "Drive safe, son. The roads are icy." They got into the truck. The engine sputtered and coughed before roaring to life with a cloud of black smoke. It was a fitting exit. Noisy, dirty, and broken. I didn't wave. I waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner. Then I turned back to the door. A white van pulled up to the curb. It was the locksmith. I had scheduled him for 6 o'clock sharp. Evening Mac, the locksmith said, walking up the steps with his tool belt. Ready to secure the perimeter. Ready, I said. I watched him drill out the old lock, the lock that Tiffany had keys to, the lock that Darius had used to enter this house for 5 years without ever saying thank you. The metal shavings fell onto the mat. He installed a new deadbolt, a heavy-duty, high-security lock. He handed me the new keys. They were heavy, cold, and shiny. I put the key in the lock. I turned it. Click. The sound was final. It was the sound of a chapter closing. I walked out to the lawn. I had one more thing to do. I went to the back of my car and pulled out a sign I had ordered 3 days ago. I walked to the center of the yard, right where Tiffany used to host her garden parties. I pushed the metal stakes into the frozen ground. I used my foot to drive them deep. I stepped back and looked at it. For sale by owner, price to sell immediately. I took a picture of the sign. I opened my phone and sent it to Darius. The text message was simple. The renovation begins now. I got into my car. I turned on the heated seats. I drove away, leaving the house dark and empty behind me. It was just a building now, a pile of bricks and wood. The ghosts were gone. And for the first time in a long time, the air in Lake Forest felt breathable again. There is a poetic justice in geography that most people miss, but I have always paid attention to, where a man lays his head at night. For the last 5 years, my son Darius and his wife Tiffany slept in a king-sized bed in Lake Forest, surrounded by silence and oak trees. Now they were sleeping on a pull-out sofa in a one-bedroom apartment on 79th Street, right in the heart of the neighborhood where I grew up. I arranged for the apartment through a property management company I own under a shell corporation. They didn't know I was the landlord. They just knew it was the only place that would approve their application with a bankruptcy pending and an eviction on their record. The rent was $800 a month. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors argue about money, which was ironic, considering Darius and Tiffany were about to have the exact same arguments. I parked my car down the block one evening just to watch the lights go on in their window. It was a cruel thing to do, perhaps, but I needed to see if the lesson was taking root. The apartment was small, cramped. It smelled of boiled cabbage and stale hallway cigarettes. For a girl like Tiffany, who used to complain if her lavender pillow mist wasn't organic, this wasn't just a step down, it was a descent into hell. The reality of their new life hit them on Monday morning. The luxury of sleeping in until 10 was gone. Survival requires waking up early. Tiffany, the woman who used to spend her days at Pilates and brunch, had to put on a uniform. It was a bright red polyester vest for a discount grocery chain called Price Mart. I heard about her first day through the grapevine. My cousin's daughter works at the same store. She told me Tiffany stood at the register for 8 hours straight. Her feet, used to Italian leather soles, were swollen and blistered in cheap sneakers. She had to scan coupons. She had to deal with customers who yelled at her because the milk was 50 cents more expensive than last week. Imagine the humiliation. The woman who used to snap her fingers at waiters was now the one being snapped at. At one point, a woman she used to know from her yoga class came in to buy bottled water. Tiffany tried to hide behind the register display, ducking down so low she almost hit her head, but she couldn't hide from the work. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of the scanner became the soundtrack of her new life, counting away the seconds of her pride. Darius didn't fare much better. He had no car, so he leased a Toyota Corolla through a predatory ride-share program to drive for Uber. My son, the man who used to sit in the back of a town car while I drove him to private school, was now a chauffeur for drunk college kids and angry businessmen. He spent 12 hours a day in traffic. He learned what it felt like to have a stranger vomit in your back seat and realize you have to clean it up yourself because you can't afford a detailer. He learned that 5 stars doesn't pay the rent. He learned that his MBA didn't mean a thing when he was merging onto the Dan Ryan Expressway at rush hour with a passenger screaming about being late for a flight. By the time they got home that night, they weren't a power couple. They were 2 exhausted, broken people crammed into a box, and that is when the cannibalism started. When you remove the cushion of money, relationships are tested against the hard bone of reality. Darius and Tiffany failed the test. I listened to the audio from the security camera I had installed in the hallway outside their door. I didn't need to see inside to know what was happening. The walls were paper thin. "I can't do this," Tiffany screamed. Her voice was shrill, laced with panic. "I smell like onions. My back is killing me." "And for what, $12 an hour?" "This is your fault. You were supposed to fix this. You were supposed to be the man." "Me?" Darius yelled back. His voice was hoarse from yelling at traffic. "You are the one who told him to disappear. You are the one who had to have the parties and the clothes and the cars. If you hadn't been so greedy, we would still be in the mansion." "Don't you dare blame me," she shrieked. "You are his son. You should have stood up to him. You are a coward, Darius. You have always been a coward. You let your daddy pay your bills until you were almost 40. I married a child, and I married a leech," Darius shouted. "You think I don't know. You think I don't know. You only married me because you thought I was rich. Well, guess what, Tiff? I am not rich. I never was. It was all him. And now that he is gone, you are looking at me like I am garbage." There was the sound of glass breaking. A plate maybe, or a cup. "I am leaving you as soon as I save enough money," Tiffany sobbed. "I swear to God, Darius, I am gone," Good Go Darius yelled. "Go find another old man to sponge off of." "Oh wait, you can't. Because you are 34 and you work at a discount grocery store. You aren't exactly a catch anymore, sweetheart." The silence that followed was heavy and cold. It was the sound of love dying. Or rather, the sound of realizing that love had never been there in the first place. I turned off the audio feed. It was enough. They were tearing each other apart just as I predicted. But the breaking point hadn't fully arrived yet. Darius still had one last card to play. He still thought he could charm his way back into my good graces. 3 hours later, around 10 o'clock at night, I was in my temporary suite at the Palmer House Hotel downtown. I was drinking chamomile tea and reading a book on philosophy. I liked the Stoics. They understood that suffering is necessary for growth. My phone rang. "It was the front desk," Mr. Holloway, the concierge, said. "There is a gentleman here to see you. He says he is your son. He seems distressed." "Send him up," I said. "But don't let him in the room. Just let him off the elevator." I waited. I watched the monitor connected to the camera outside my suite door. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. Darius stepped out. He looked unrecognizable. The arrogance was gone. His shoulders were slumped. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie soaking wet from the freezing rain outside. He hadn't shaved in days. He looked like I did when I was 20 coming home from a double shift, except I had hope in my eyes. He had nothing but fear. He walked to my door. He raised his hand to knock, then hesitated. He rested his forehead against the wood. "Dad," he whispered, "I know you are in there." I stood on the other side of the door, silent as a stone. "Dad, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I can't do it. I can't live like this. Tiffany hates me. I hate myself. I am driving in circles all day for pennies. I am tired, Dad. I am so tired." He slid down the door until he was kneeling on the hallway carpet. "I am sorry," he sobbed. "I am sorry about the party. I am sorry I didn't defend you. I am sorry I took the money. Just let me come in. I will leave Tiffany. I will do whatever you want. Just let me come home. Please. I am begging you." I listened to my son weep. A part of me, the father part, wanted to rip the door open and pull him into my arms. I wanted to write a check and make the pain go away. That is what I had done his whole life. Whenever he fell, I caught him. Whenever he broke something, I bought a new one. But that was the problem. By catching him, I had crippled him. If I opened that door now, he would learn the wrong lesson. He would learn that if he cried hard enough, the consequences would disappear. He would learn that betrayal has a price, but that price is negotiable. I needed him to learn that some doors once closed can only be opened from the inside. He had to build his own key. I looked at the monitor. He was curled up on the floor looking like a lost child. I stepped closer to the door. I didn't unlock it. I simply spoke through the wood. "Go home to your wife, Darius," I said. He jumped. He scrambled to his knees. Dad, opened the door." "You have a job," I said firmly. "You have a roof over your head. You have a wife. You are a man. Darius, start acting like one." "But I can't," he screamed, pounding on the door. "It is too hard. Life is hard," I roared back. "The way I grew up was hard. The way I built that company was hard. You have had it easy for 38 years. Welcome to the starting line, son. You are late. Dad. Please go home, I said, my voice dropping to a final steel whisper. Do not come back here until you have something to offer me other than tears. I don't want your apology. I want your success, and you won't find it in this hotel room. I walked away from the door. I went into the bedroom and turned on the television to drown out the sound of his sobbing. I watched on the monitor as security finally came and gently escorted him back to the elevator. He looked back one last time, his face a mask of utter despair. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. But as I turned off the light that night, I knew I had done the right thing. He was at the bottom now. There was nowhere left to fall. The only way was up or out. And for the first time in his life, the choice was entirely his. Greed is a strange anesthetic. It numbs the pain of humiliation. It dulls the sting of poverty. And for my son Darius and his wife Tiffany, the rumor of money was the only drug strong enough to make them forget they were living in a tenement and driving a borrowed Toyota. It had been 3 weeks since I evicted them. 3 weeks of silence. I was back in Chicago, staying in a private suite, wrapping up the sale of the house. I had listed it below market value for a quick cash sale. I didn't want a bidding war. I wanted the chapter closed. The notification hit the public real estate apps on a Tuesday morning. Sold. Closing price, $1.2 million. Cash. Darius saw it first. He was sitting in his car in a McDonald's parking lot using their free Wi-Fi to save data. I can imagine the moment perfectly. He probably choked on his dollar menu coffee. $1.2 million. To a man who currently had $40 in his pocket, that number didn't look like a figure. It looked like salvation. He called Tiffany immediately. She was on her break at the grocery store, rubbing her swollen ankles. Tiff, he whispered, his voice trembling with excitement. He sold it. He actually sold it. $1.2 million. Tiffany didn't ask how he was. She didn't ask about his day. She asked the only question that mattered to her. Where is the money, Darius? Where did he put it? He put it in the trust, Darius said. The Ruby Holloway Trust. The one I am the beneficiary of. They did the math right there on the phone. They calculated that I was 71 years old. They calculated that black men of my generation had a certain life expectancy. They calculated my cholesterol levels based on what I used to eat 10 years ago. He can't live forever, Tiffany said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He is stressed. He is old. That money is just sitting there, Darius, waiting for us. We just have to be patient. We just have to wait him out. And just like that, their hatred for me transformed into a predatory patience. They stopped fighting with each other. They stopped screaming about the cold apartment. They had a new purpose. They were no longer a failing couple. They were co-conspirators in a death watch. They started sending me text messages again. But this time, they weren't angry. They were sickly sweet. Thinking of you, Dad, Darius texted. Hope you are eating well. Don't work too hard, Mac Tiffany sent. We worry about your heart. I read these messages and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter wind. They weren't worried about my heart stopping. They were praying for it. They were circling me like vultures high in the desert sky, waiting for the stumble, waiting for the fall. I decided it was time to give them what they wanted, or at least the illusion of it. I needed to know with absolute certainty what was in their hearts. I needed to know if there was even a shred of genuine love left, or if I was just a walking bank account to them. I called my old friend Dr. Vance. He was the chief of cardiology at Northwestern Memorial. We had played golf together for 20 years. Vance, I said, I need a favor. I need to run a stress test. But not on my heart, on my family. Vance listened to my plan. He hesitated at first. It was unorthodox. It was dramatic. But he knew what I had been through. He knew about the eviction. He agreed to help me stage the final act. On Thursday afternoon, I checked myself into the VIP wing of the hospital. We set the stage. I lay in the bed hooked up to monitors that beeped rhythmically. I wore the gown. I looked frail. It is amazing how much older you look when you take out your dentures and stop shaving for 2 days. Dr. Vance made the call at 4 o'clock. He called Darius. Mr. Holloway. Dr. Vance said, his voice grave. This is Dr. Vance at Northwestern. You need to come immediately. Your father has suffered a massive cardiac event. A massive cardiac event. Those words are a sledgehammer to a loving son. But to Darius, I wonder what he heard. Did he hear tragedy, or did he hear the sound of a vault door opening? I lay there with my eyes closed, listening. The room was quiet. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I waited. 40 minutes later, the door burst open. Darius and Tiffany rushed in. They were out of breath. They were wearing their work clothes, his stained jeans, her red polyester vest. They looked frantic. "Is he alive?" Darius shouted at the nurse. "Is he conscious?" The nurse, who was in on the plan, put a finger to her lips. "Shh," she whispered. "He is stable but comatose. The next few hours are critical." They approached the bed. I kept my breathing shallow. I kept my eyes shut. I felt them standing over me. "Oh my God," Tiffany whispered. She sounded terrified, but then she said something that made my blood run cold. "Darius," she hissed. "The bag. Check his personal effects bag. The lawyer said he carries the updated will in his briefcase. Not a prayer, not a tear." Her first instinct, seeing me lying helpless in a hospital bed, was to rifle through my belongings. "Stop it, Tiff," Darius whispered back. "The doctor is right there." Dr. Vance stepped into the room. He held a clipboard. He looked at them with the cold, professional detachment of a surgeon. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway," Dr. Vance said. Dr. Tiffany said, instantly switching into her grieving daughter act. She grabbed Darius's hand. She forced a sob. Is he going to make it? We love him so much. We haven't spoken in weeks because of a silly misunderstanding, and now, oh God, please tell me he isn't going to die without knowing we love him." It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. If I hadn't known better, if I hadn't seen the text messages, I might have believed her. Dr. Vance looked at the chart. "His condition is very serious," Vance said. "His heart is tired. We are doing everything we can. But at his age and with the stress he has been under recently, you should prepare yourselves." Darius stepped forward. "Doctor, look, we are his next of kin. We need to know. Did he leave any instructions? Did he sign any paperwork recently? We need to make sure his affairs are in order. For his sake, of course." Dr. Vance nodded slowly. He reached into the pocket of his white coat. "Actually, he did," Vance said. "When Mr. Holloway arrived, he was conscious for a brief moment. He seemed to know this was coming. He was very insistent that I give you this." Vance pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with red wax. It looked official. It looked heavy. My name was written on the front in my shaky handwriting. "To Darius and Tiffany." "What is it?" Darius asked, reaching for it. His hands were trembling. "He told me it was his final instructions," Vance said. "He said that if he didn't wake up, or if the situation looked grim, I was to hand this to you immediately. He said it concerns the disposition of the $1.2 million. The room went silent. The only sound was the beeping of the monitor that was tracking my perfectly healthy heart rate. Tiffany's eyes locked onto that envelope. The hunger in her gaze was naked and terrifying. She stopped crying instantly. She let go of Darius's hand and reached out. "Give it to us," she said. "We need to handle this. We are the family." Dr. Vance handed the envelope to Darius. "I will leave you alone with him," Vance said. "Take your time." The doctor walked out, closing the door softly. I lay there listening to the sound of paper tearing. They didn't even wait for him to leave the hallway. They tore into that envelope like starving wolves tearing into a carcass. "It is the will," Tiffany whispered. "It has to be the will. Or the trust access codes." Darius pulled out the document inside. I heard the rustle of the paper unfolding. "Read it," Tiffany urged. "Read it, Darius." "What does it say?" "Who gets the money?" I heard. Darius drew a sharp breath. This isn't a will," he stammered. "What is it?" Tiffany asked. It is a deed," Darius said. "A deed," Tiffany gasped. "To the house. Did he buy us a new house?" "No," Darius said, his voice confused. "It is a deed of donation." I could feel the confusion radiating off them. "What does that mean?" Tiffany snapped. Darius started to read aloud. His voice shook with every word. "I, Marcus Holloway, being of sound mind and body, do hereby irrevocably transfer the sum of $1.2 million representing the total proceeds from the sale of my property to—" He stopped. "To who?" Tiffany shrieked. "To who, Darius?" "To the Maya Holloway Education and Entrepreneurship Foundation," Darius whispered. There was a silence so profound, It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "And there is a letter," Darius said. He pulled out a second sheet of paper. "Read it," Tiffany said. Her voice was dead. Darius cleared his throat. He read my words, the words I had written that morning while drinking coffee in the hotel lobby. "Dear Darius and Tiffany, if you are reading this, it means I am either dead or you think I am dying. It also means that you came to the hospital not to hold my hand but to hold my wallet. I knew you would come. I knew you would ask about the money before you asked about my pain. You were waiting for me to die. You were banking on my death to solve the problems created by your life. That is not how a Holloway lives. So I have decided to remove the temptation. The money is gone. It is locked in a trust for Maya. You cannot touch it. You cannot borrow against it. You cannot sue for it. But I didn't leave you nothing. I left you an opportunity. The opportunity to stop waiting for me to die and start learning how to live. P.S. Look at the heart monitor." Darius stopped reading. "Look at the monitor," Tiffany asked. They both turned to look at the screen next to my bed. I opened my eyes. I sat up. I pulled the oxygen tube out of my nose. I looked at them. They were frozen in horror, clutching the papers, their faces pale as ghosts. "Hello, son," I said. My voice was strong. I wasn't frail. I wasn't dying. I pointed to the door. "You failed the test!" Tiffany screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated shock. She stepped back, dropping the papers. You are alive," she stammered. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. "I am more than alive, Tiffany," I said. "I am disappointed." I stood up fully dressed in my suit underneath the hospital gown. I took off the gown and threw it on the floor. "And now that we have established that you are only here for the money and that the money is gone, I think we have nothing left to talk about." I walked past them. I walked toward the door where Dr. Vance was waiting. Darius reached out to grab my arm. "Dad, wait." I stopped. I didn't turn around. "You have a shift to get to Darius," I said, cold as ice. "I hear it is surging on Uber right now. You shouldn't keep your passengers waiting." I walked out of the hospital room, leaving them with the deed to a foundation they couldn't access, and the realization that the man they wanted dead was the only one who had ever truly tried to save them. I didn't need to be in the hospital room to know exactly what was happening. I had walked out, leaving my son and his wife alone with the document that would define the rest of their lives. I sat in the back of my town car watching the hospital entrance, waiting for them to emerge. I knew they weren't chasing after me. They were too busy chasing the ghost of the money they thought they deserved. Inside that sterile room under the harsh fluorescent lights, Darius was holding the thick, cream-colored paper with trembling hands. Tiffany was reading over his shoulder, her breath hitching in her throat. They were looking for a check. They were looking for a routing number. They were looking for the words "pay" to the order of Darius Holloway. But those words weren't there. Instead, at the very top of the document in bold Gothic font were the words that sealed their fate: the Maya Holloway Education and Entrepreneurship Foundation. Tiffany grabbed the paper from Darius. She flipped through the pages, frantically tearing the edges in her desperation. She scanned the legal jargon, skipping the paragraphs about mission statements and charitable goals. She was hunting for the payout. She wanted to know where the $1.2 million from the house sale had gone. She found it on page 4. Section B, Asset Allocation. The grantor Marcus Holloway hereby irrevocably transfers all liquid assets, including but not limited to the proceeds from the sale of the property at 1402 Maple Drive, totaling $1,200,000 into the corpus of the foundation. Tiffany screamed. It wasn't a scream of grief. It was the scream of a thief who had opened a safe only to find it empty. "He gave it away," she shrieked. "He gave it all to a foundation." "No," Darius whispered, pointing to the next line. Look at the beneficiary. Primary beneficiary, Maya Holloway." Tiffany's eyes lit up for a second. "Maya. She is our daughter. We are her guardians. We control her assets." She started to laugh, a hysterical, manic sound. "He is an idiot. He put it in Maya's name. We can just access it as her parents. We can charge the fund for her housing, her food, her administrative costs. We are rich again, Darius." But they hadn't read page 5. I knew Tiffany. I knew she would view her own daughter as a piggy bank. That is why page 5 existed. That is why I had spent 3 hours with Sterling Vance, my lawyer, crafting the most ironclad, bulletproof trustee clause in the history of Illinois family law. Darius turned the page. His face went gray. Trustee designation, he read aloud. The sole trustee and administrator of the foundation shall be the legal firm of Sterling Vance and Associates. No funds shall be dispersed to the parents or legal guardians of the beneficiary for any reason whatsoever. Darius stopped reading. He looked at Tiffany. "We can't touch it," he whispered. "Not a penny. Sterling Vance hates us. He wouldn't give us money for a pack of gum." Tiffany snatched the paper back. She read the fine print. Disbursement of funds shall commence only upon the beneficiary reaching the age of 25, provided she completes a 4-year university degree or presents a viable business plan approved by the trustee. 25, Tiffany yelled. Maya is 8. That is 17 years from now. What are we supposed to do for 17 years? Darius sat down heavily on the hospital bed where I had been lying just minutes before. The sheets were still warm. "We are broke, Tiff," he said. "We are actually broke." He locked the money away until we are in our 50s. But the torture wasn't over. I hadn't just locked the money away. I had left a key. A very specific, very dangerous key. I knew my son. I knew he was weak. I knew he stayed with Tiffany because she was the dominant personality, the one who drove the ambition, the one who demanded the lifestyle. And I knew Tiffany stayed with Darius because of his last name and the promise of my inheritance. Their marriage wasn't a union of souls. It was a business merger. And like any bad business merger, it could be dissolved if the price was right. On the last page of the document, under the section titled Compassionate Allowances, there was a final clause. I called it the Solomonic Test. Tiffany found it. Her eyes narrowed as she read the paragraph. Item 7, Conditional Living Allowance for Darius Holloway. She went quiet. Deadly quiet. "What is it?" Darius asked. "Does he give me something?" Tiffany read the words slowly, her voice dripping with venom. Recognizing that my son Darius lacks the skills to support himself due to years of dependency, the foundation grants a monthly stipend of $2,000 for his basic living expenses. $2,000, Darius said, hope flaring in his chest. That is something. It is not much, but it pays the rent on the apartment. It buys food. We can survive on that until I find a better job." "Keep reading," Tiffany hissed. Darius leaned in. He read the condition printed in italics below the amount. Condition of disbursement. This stipend is intended solely for the support of Darius Holloway as an individual. Therefore, these funds shall only be released upon receipt of a certified divorce decree dissolving the marriage between Darius Holloway and Tiffany Holloway. Darius froze. If Darius and Tiffany remain married or cohabitating, the document continued, the monthly allowance is $0. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. The reality of what I had done settled over them like a heavy blanket. I had put a price tag on their marriage. If they stayed together, they starved. If they split up, Darius got a lifeline. It wasn't a fortune, but to a man driving Uber for scraps, $2,000 a month was a fortune. It was freedom. Tiffany looked at Darius. For the first time in years, she didn't look at him with contempt or demand. She looked at him as an obstacle. She did the math in her head. $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year. It wasn't enough for her lifestyle, but it was enough for him. And if he had that money and she had nothing... Darius looked at Tiffany. He saw the wheels turning in her eyes. He realized that I had just handed him a way out. I was paying him to leave her. I was subsidizing his escape from the woman who had ruined his relationship with me. "He is trying to break us up," Tiffany whispered. "He is paying you to divorce me." Darius didn't say anything. He was thinking about the apartment with the thin walls. He was thinking about Tiffany screaming at him because he smelled like onions. He was thinking about the humiliation of the last month. And then he thought about the $2,000, guaranteed, every month, just for him. "He is evil," Tiffany said, but her voice lacked conviction. She was terrified. She realized that without Darius she had no claim to the Holloway name, but with Darius she was anchored to a sinking ship with zero cargo. Darius stood up. He took the paper from her hands. He folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. "It is a test, Tiff," Darius said quietly. "A test," she snapped. "It is a bribe. Are you going to take it? Are you going to sell your wife for $2,000 a month?" Darius looked at her. He looked at the woman who had slapped his father, the woman who had cooked burnt soup to be spiteful, the woman who had wished for me to disappear. "I don't know," Darius said. He walked to the door. "Where are you going?" she yelled. "We have to fight this. We have to find another lawyer." "I have to go to work," Darius said. "It is surging downtown." He walked out. He didn't wait for her. I watched from my car as Darius exited the hospital. He looked different. He walked with a little more speed. He stopped at the curb, looked up at the sky, and took a deep breath. Then he got into his beat-up Toyota and drove away. Tiffany came out 5 minutes later. She was crying again, but nobody was watching. She stood on the curb looking left and right, realizing she didn't have a ride. She pulled out her phone to call an Uber. I watched her tap the screen. I wondered if she knew that the driver she was about to summon might be her husband, and I wondered if he would charge her the surge price. I tapped the partition glass. "Drive," I told my driver. We pulled away from the curb, leaving the hospital behind. I felt a lightness in my chest that had nothing to do with the fake heart attack. I had done it. I had saved the money for Maya. And I had given my son the hardest, most necessary choice of his life. The money was gone. The house was gone. The enabling was gone. All that was left was the truth. And for the first time, I was excited to see what my son would do with it. The sidewalk outside the hospital was cold, but the look in Tiffany's eyes was colder. I sat in my car a block away, watching through the tinted windows as my daughter-in-law read the document that destroyed her life. She stood there for a long time, the wind whipping her hair across her face, oblivious to the pedestrians walking around her. She wasn't crying anymore. Tears are for people who have hope, and Tiffany had just realized that her hope was dead. She held the paper in one hand and her phone in the other. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. She was doing the math. She was calculating the value of her marriage against the cost of her survival. The equation was simple. If she stayed with Darius, they would both starve. They would be two broke, unemployed socialites living in a tenement, hating each other until the end of time. But if she left him, Darius would get $2,000 a month. For a moment, I wondered if she would leave him out of love. I wondered if she would make a noble sacrifice so that at least one of them could survive. But then I saw her face. I saw the curl of her lip. I saw the way she looked at her phone, scrolling through her contacts. She wasn't thinking about saving Darius. She was thinking about cutting off a limb that had become gangrenous. She realized that Darius was now a liability. He was a man with no inheritance, no house, and no future unless he was single. And she knew that even if he got the $2,000, he would never share it with her willingly. He would blame her for losing the millions. She made her decision right there on the curb. She didn't call Darius. She didn't call her mother. She called a lawyer. Not the expensive corporate shark she used to threaten me with, but a billboard lawyer she found on Google. A lawyer who specialized in quick, cheap, no-fault divorces. I watched her get into a cab. She didn't look back at the hospital. She didn't look for Darius's car. She looked straight ahead, her jaw set in a line of grim determination. She was done playing the role of the devoted wife. The show was canceled. That night, the apartment on 79th Street became a war zone. I didn't need a camera to know what happened because Darius called me the next morning weeping. He told me he came home from driving Uber to find Tiffany packing. She wasn't packing neatly. She was throwing her things into garbage bags, stripping the apartment of anything that could be sold at a pawn shop. She took the toaster. She took the towels. She even took the light bulbs from the lamps. When Darius asked her what she was doing, she didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just handed him the divorce papers she had printed off the internet. "Sign them," she said. Darius told me he stood there stunned. He asked her why. He asked her if it was because of the money. He asked her if she was leaving him just so he could get the allowance. And that is when Tiffany finally told him the truth. The brutal, unvarnished truth that had been hiding behind her fake smiles for 5 years. "I am not leaving you so you can get the money, Darius," she told him. "I am leaving you because you are useless without it. I married a lifestyle, not a man. And since the lifestyle is gone, the contract is void." She told him he was pathetic. She told him he was a child in a man's body. She told him that she had never respected him, only tolerated him because I was writing the checks. Darius tried to argue. He tried to tell her he loved her, but she just laughed. She stepped over him as he sat on the floor, dragging her garbage bags out the door. She didn't say goodbye. She just said, "Mail the papers by Friday or I will sue you for alimony on the $2,000. She slammed the door, and just like that, the marriage of the century, the love story that was supposed to last forever, ended in a cheap apartment with the sound of a latch clicking shut. The divorce was finalized in record time. Since there were no assets to divide, only debts, the court processed it within weeks. I made sure of that. I had my lawyer expedite the paperwork on the back end, paying the fees anonymously. I wanted the Band-Aid ripped off quickly. The day the decree was signed, the first deposit of $2,000 hit Darius's new individual bank account. I received a notification on my phone. The system worked. The condition was met. My son was single and he was fed. But money is not a cure for a broken heart, and it certainly isn't a cure for a broken ego. Darius didn't take the money and start a business. He didn't take the money and go back to school. He took the money and hid. He stayed in that apartment surrounding himself with the silence of his failure. I kept tabs on him. I knew he was eating better. I knew he kept the heat on. But I also knew he spent his nights staring at the wall, replaying the last 5 years in his head, realizing that every "I love you" from his wife had been a transaction, and every hard lesson from his father had been an act of love. As for Tiffany, her landing was far harder and far less cushioned. She thought that by leaving Darius, she was freeing herself to find a new, better life. She thought she could go back to the dating market, use her looks, and find another rich man to take care of her. But she forgot one thing. Lake Forest is a small town, and rich men talk. She became a pariah. The video of her screaming at me was still online. The story of how she treated her husband was common knowledge. No man with a portfolio wanted anything to do with her. She was damaged goods. She was radioactive. She lost her job at the grocery store because she kept trying to hide from customers. She moved into a studio apartment in a rough part of town, a place far worse than the one she shared with Darius. I saw her once months later. I was sitting in my car at a stoplight and I saw a woman waiting for the bus. She was wearing a faded coat that used to be expensive but was now frayed at the cuffs. She looked 10 years older. Her face was hard-etched with bitterness. She was holding a plastic bag from a discount pharmacy. It was Tiffany. She looked at the cars passing by. She looked at the Mercedes and the BMWs with a hunger that was painful to watch. But it wasn't the hunger of ambition anymore. It was the hunger of regret. She had held a winning lottery ticket in her hand, a loving family, a secure future, and she had burned it because she wanted to cash it in too early. The light changed. I drove past her. I didn't honk. I didn't wave. I left her there on the corner waiting for a bus that would take her back to an empty room where the only thing she owned was her pride, and even that was worth nothing. Darius eventually reached out to me. It wasn't a request for money. It was a letter, a real letter written on paper. He wrote that he was sorry. He wrote that he understood now. He wrote that the $2,000 a month kept him alive, but the shame kept him awake. He said he was taking a class at the community college. He was learning to be a paralegal. He wanted to understand the law so he would never be tricked again. I didn't reply immediately. I let him sit with his thoughts. I let him build his own character brick by brick without my mortar. But I did change the terms of the trust slightly. I added a clause that said if he completed his degree, the allowance would increase. Just a little. Just enough to show him that effort yields reward. The family I had built was gone. The Sunday dinners were gone. The illusion of perfection was gone. But what remained was something real. It was a landscape of ruins. Yes, but in those ruins, the truth was finally starting to grow. I went back to Florida. I sat on my balcony and watched the ocean. I thought about Maya. The trust fund was growing. The interest was compounding. She was safe. She was protected from the greed of her parents. And as I watched the sun set over the water, I realized that this was the most expensive lesson I had ever taught. It cost me a house. It cost me my relationship with my son. It cost me my peace of mind for a year. But looking at the freedom I felt and knowing that the parasites were gone, I knew it was worth every penny. The check had cleared. The debt was paid. And finally the account was closed. They say that the best revenge is living well. I disagree. Revenge implies that you are still thinking about the people who hurt you, that your happiness is a reaction to their misery. I am not interested in revenge. I am interested in peace. And as I sit here on my terrace watching the sun dip below the horizon of the Atlantic Ocean, I can tell you that peace is the most expensive luxury in the world, and I paid for it in full. It has been 5 years since I walked out of that hospital room in Chicago. 5 years since I executed the disappearance that Tiffany begged for. I am 76 years old now. By all medical accounts, I should be slowing down. I should be frail. But the salt air of the Florida coast has a way of preserving old timber. I swim a mile every morning. I trade stocks on my laptop until noon. And in the evenings, I drink wine that I bought with my own money in a home where no one asks me when I'm going to die. My apartment is on the 20th floor. It is glass and steel, open and bright. It is the complete opposite of the dark, heavy colonial mansion in Lake Forest. There are no shadows here. There are no whispering relatives plotting my demise in the kitchen. There is only the sound of the waves and the jazz music playing softly from my speakers. But today, the apartment is not silent. There is laughter coming from the kitchen. It is a bright, clear sound that reminds me of wind chimes. Maya is here. She is 13 now. She is no longer the little girl with the missing front tooth who used to hide under the table. She is tall, with her grandmother Ruby's high cheekbones and a sharp, inquisitive mind that scares me sometimes. She comes to stay with me every summer. For 3 months, she escapes the small, cramped reality of her life in Chicago to breathe the free air of my world. "Grandpa," she calls out, walking onto the terrace. She is holding a tray with 2 glasses of iced tea. She walks with confidence. She doesn't tiptoe. She knows she belongs here. "I made the tea," she says, setting the tray down. "And I used the good sugar. Don't tell my dad. He says sugar is too expensive." I look at her. She knows the truth. We don't hide it from her. She knows that her father Darius lives on a strict budget. She knows that he works as a paralegal now, making a modest salary supplemented by the allowance I provide. She knows that he is a better man for it, even if he is a poorer one. "How is your father?" I ask, taking the glass. "He is okay," Maya says, sitting down in the lounge chair opposite me. "He is studying for the bar exam again. He failed last time, but he says he is going to keep trying. He looks tired, though, but he cooks dinner every night. It is usually pasta, but he tries." I nod. "Darius is climbing his mountain. It is a slow climb, and he slips often, but at least he is climbing. He isn't waiting for a helicopter to lift him to the summit anymore." "And your mother?" I ask. The question is heavier. Maya looks out at the ocean. Her expression hardens slightly. She is too young to have that look in her eyes, the look of someone who has seen their heroes fall. "I haven't seen her in 6 months," Maya says quietly. "She moved to Arizona with some guy she met online. She sent me a postcard for my birthday. She asked if the trust fund kicks in early for medical emergencies. She said she needs dental work." I feel a flash of anger, but it passes quickly. Tiffany is still Tiffany. Even across the country, even after everything, she is still looking for an angle. "What did you tell her?" I ask. Maya takes a sip of her tea. She looks at me over the rim of the glass, and I see myself reflected in her eyes. "I told her to call Uncle Sterling at the law firm," she says. "I told her I don't handle the finances." I smile. It is a deep, chest-rumbling laugh that feels good. She learned. She learned the most important lesson of the Holloway family. Protect the asset. Protect yourself. "You are a tough cookie, Maya Holloway," I say. "I have a good teacher," she replies. We sit in silence for a while, watching the sky turn purple. This is the victory. It isn't the money. It isn't the apartment. It is this girl. If I had stayed in that house, if I had let Darius and Tiffany drain me dry, Maya would have grown up watching them. She would have learned that greed is a virtue and that family is a resource to be exploited. She would have become another Tiffany. By cutting off the branch, I saved the tree. I removed the rot so that the new growth could be healthy. It was a painful surgery. It cost me my relationship with my son for a long time. It cost me my reputation in my old neighborhood. But looking at this smart, kind, resilient 13-year-old girl, I know I made the trade of the century. Grandpa, Maya asks suddenly, "Do you miss the big house?" I think about the mansion on Maple Drive. I think about the cold drafts, the expensive repairs, and the memories of feeling invisible in my own living room. "No," I say honestly. "A house is just a box, Maya. Home is where you are respected. This is my home." She smiles, satisfied with the answer. She stands up. "I am going to go read," she says. "Uncle Sterling sent me the books on compound interest you ordered. He said if I finish them by August, he will let me sit in on a board meeting." "Go," I say. "Future CEO." She kisses me on the cheek and goes back inside. I'm alone again with the sunset. The wind is picking up, cooling the humid air. I reach for the bottle of wine sitting on the table. It is a Cabernet, a vintage that costs more than my first car. I pour a glass. The dark red liquid swirls, catching the dying light. I think about that Christmas Eve 5 years ago. I think about the humiliation, the folding table, the ham I wasn't allowed to carve, the laughter of the guests when Tiffany mocked my $500 gift. I think about her words. "The best Christmas present would be if you disappeared without a trace." She wanted me to vanish so she could take over. She wanted me to be a ghost so she could be the queen. Well, I gave her her wish. I disappeared from her life completely. I took my money, my wisdom, and my love, and I vanished. And in my absence, she found out exactly who she was. She found out that without me, she was nothing. I lift the glass to the horizon. There is no one here to toast with me, but that is fine. I am toasting to the silence. I am toasting to the peace. Merry Christmas, Tiffany, I whisper to the wind. I take a sip. The wine is rich, complex, and perfect. Thank you for the suggestion, I say. It was the best gift you ever gave me. I lean back in my chair, closing my eyes, listening to the ocean. I am Marcus Holloway. I am 76 years old. I have no mortgage. I have no debt. I have no toxic family members draining my spirit. I am not just alive. I am free. Lesson learned. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for toxic family members is to let them face the consequences of their own actions. We often confuse love with enabling. By shielding my son from the harsh realities of life, I wasn't helping him. I was crippling him. Respect is a currency that must be earned, not demanded. And when you are treated like an option, the best strategic move is to remove yourself from the equation entirely. In the end, I didn't just save my dignity, I saved my granddaughter's future from the cycle of greed. A legacy isn't what you leave for people, it's what you leave in them. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever had to cut off a family member to save your own peace? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, your self-worth is not negotiable.